Okay, vino madunai no heno aleno o maasea deno kone naleno maasea deno kone. Sorry about that. I'd like to dedicate this year Torah that we're learning today. Leilun Shmat Jahari Bat Saada Ruach Adonai Tenichena Began Eden. Okay, so we're in Shaare Orah once again. We're on the bottom of page Reish Yud Vav. Okay, and it's on all at the bottom, the last one on the bottom. Shafilu ha'elyonim. So what we said before is, remember we talked about oseh shalom bimromav, right? What does that mean, oseh shalom bimromav? That Hashem also, makes shalom in the shamayim, which means we have an obligation to make shalom over here so that we can have kli machzik bracha, right? We talked about the shalom, there's no greater utensil that holds on to blessings other than the shalom, right? And it's our responsibility to make shalom in this world. And that's why if you look at the entire Messianic age, what is the feature of the Messianic age? Shalom, peace, right? The Christians talk a lot about the necessity to believe that Jesus was the Mashiach, okay? There's no commandment in the Torah, thou shalt believe in the Mashiach. It doesn't exist, as Rabbi Tovia Singer says beautifully. Why doesn't God command us to believe when the Mashiach comes? And the answer is, when the real Mashiach comes, it's not going to be, you're going to know it, because there's going to be, it's experiential. There's going to be peace everywhere, okay? And that's why if you see any war anywhere in the world, Ukraine, Gaza, wherever, Pakistan, India, if you see war anywhere, you know something, one thing, Mashiach is not here yet, right? When there's no war anywhere in the world amongst Gentiles or anyone, then you know the Mashiach is here. So if you think about it, one of the greatest proofs against Jesus being the Mashiach is what? There's no shalom, there's no peace in the world, there's still fighting. So therefore we know the Mashiach is not here yet. So just like there has to be shalom in the world, which is the responsibility of mankind to make peace in the world as best as they can. And then when the Mashiach comes, there's going to be a peace from Hashem who's going to make peace in this world. There also has to be peace in the Shamayim amongst the angels, okay? Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael bimro amen. Mean, right? Oseh shalom, the one who makes shalom in the upper worlds, he will make shalom in the future. We're talking about the time of the Mashiach. Aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael. That's what it means, oseh shalom.
And this is what the prophet means when he talks about you'll beat your swords into plowshares.
Yes. Yes.
Will hang out
yes, which means all those animals hanging out together, it's really it's an analogy for nations that normally would be fighting. Because the Christians only look at the verses that support their nonsense. If they read the Bible, the most dangerous thing a Christian could do is read everything, and in Hebrew. Right? Learn Hebrew. There's a reason why there are very, very few schools in Christianity that teach Hebrew. When do they teach Hebrew? They only teach Hebrew in the elevated classes, in the higher level, when people are already drinking the Kool-Aid, okay? And do they really ever understand the Hebrew? No. What do we take with a child? A child is 6 years old. She's already learning Hebrew, how to read, because we want to read the Tanakh. We want to read the Bible in its original language. Because if you read it in its original language, then you understand what it says. When you're reading it in a Latin or Greek or in English, yeah, you could see Jesus on every page because you're not reading it in Hebrew. You're reading it in English. So therefore, the worst thing they could do is learn Hebrew and read the Bible, all of it in its original language. If that happens, there'll be no Christians in the world, okay? Because you couldn't. So therefore, that pasuk, which they'll quote, they understand it. No one disagrees about these messianic prophecy that it's lo yisagoy goy cherev lo yimudu od milchama. What's on the UN, right? They shall beat their swords into plowshares and no more, no war, no more. No one disagrees that that's a messianic prophecy. No one, not the Christians. So what do they say? Well, he didn't fulfill his mission the first time, okay? Therefore, he's got to come back another time.
They'll say because the Jews' fault because they didn't convert.
So the big question is like this. There is no second coming in the Bible. Zero. It's nowhere. It doesn't exist. As far as the Bible is concerned, the Mashiach comes once, and that's it. It's one and done. if your first one was a failure, instead of saying to myself, well, he didn't fulfill the mission, we're waiting for him to come back and do it again. No, very simple. He wasn't the Mashiach. That's it. He's not the right guy. You know, and that's what the Rambam says, right? What does what the Rambam say? When Rabbi Bar Kochva, right? In the Bar Kochva rebellion, which is around 50 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, around 130 or so, what happened was Rabbi Akiva was one of the greatest rabbis, if not the greatest rabbi of the generation, yes? And basically says he was under the thought that Bar Kochva was the Mashiach, yes? And what does it say? Rambam says, when did he realize Bar Kochva wasn't the Mashiach? When he died. And when he died, ba'avonot, it says, meaning what? You know, whatever. The fact what is that Rabbi Akiva recognized when Bar Kochva died and the third temple had not been built, there wasn't peace in the world. What do we know right away? This is not the Mashiach. Because there's no concept of a resurrection of the Mashiach any more than there's a concept of any other Jew being resurrected. That's not limited to the Messiah. Resurrection is for all Jews. And resurrection happens after the coming of the Mashiach, not resurrection of the Mashiach. And then, no, that's not how it works. So, and that's clear if a person studies the Tanakh in its original language. Anyway, so he's serving over here. Afil ha'elyonim. So this is an interesting concept. The pasuk is clear about it, but let's understand what this means. That God also makes peace amongst the angels. Sure. Sure. Yeah.
I learned that Bar Kokhba was able to throw away the Romans for 5 years, and they had their own autonomy.
It could be.
Why? Nobody knows.
Because it was unsuccessful.
After 5 years.
I mean, there were other times. I think in the years 500, 550, something like that, one of the leaders of the Byzantine Empire, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to say a name because many of them were Rishaim, but a few of them were not Rishaim. They allowed the Jewish people to go up and to start to rebuild, to go back. And then it was stopped. So you just like you have the Purim story. What's the Purim story? Purim story, they were building the Bet HaMikdash, right? And then they stopped it. Why? Because that's the beginning of the Purim story, is the stopping of the building of the Bet HaMikdash. Achashverosh with Vashti, they stopped the building, right? That was taken over from the one before, which was Koresh. So we see the pattern, right? So Purim was a redemption, but it wasn't a complete redemption. Why? How do we know Purim wasn't a complete redemption? Because the temple that they was built, that was re-inaugurated, right? When they built the temple soon afterwards, it was destroyed later on. So the temple is not going to be destroyed ever. So the Christians will say, well, the new temple is the church. Absolute nonsense. Nonsense. Okay? Or they say the temple is within each person. Well, yes, you have to make yourself into a sanctuary. No question about that. That is totally a Jewish concept. But that doesn't mean there's not going to be a place where there's a temple to bring sacrifices into it, to repair the relationship between man and God.
By the Times of Israel 2-3 days ago reported that archaeologists now have this idea that when the rebellion started, a lot of the leaders were officers in the Jewish officers in the Roman army who came over. They had Roman army. The Jews were always involved. It's amazing because the Jews were mercenaries for Persia. I mean, Jews were good fighters. They were known as good fighters, just like we see in the IDF.
100%.
In the ancient world, they were good fighters.
And if you want to learn the craft of how to fight, you learn it from the Romans. Again, without, of course, divine intervention, no better place to learn the craft of warfare than the Romans. Okay? Anyway, just like we know that the upper Sfirot, there are in the Yosher, we talked about the Yosher, right? What's the Yosher? There's two types, two manifestations, of the Sfirot. One is Gilgulim. One is igulim, right? Circles, one in circle inside the other. That we don't ever talk about at all, for the most part, in the Kabbalah. But what is talked about is the Yosher, that we have like the Komat Adam, where we have them organized into three lines: the line of Chesed, the line of Gvura, and the line of the Rachamim, the line of the Tiferet in the middle, right? So we understand that there are two different. There's Chesed and Gvura. These are opposites of each other, right? Chesed is unlimited loving kindness given out. Gvura limits that. So there's Oseh. He says over here, just like we have Sfirot that are, I don't want to say against. The word he uses against, it doesn't mean a negative. It's negdiot, which means it's like ezer kenegdo. Is your wife against you? She's not against you. She's face to face with you, which means she's an opposite that is face to face with you. That's what it means, ezer kenegdo. It doesn't mean she's against you, because your wife always against you. You're not going to stay married, right? It has to be but what the idea ezer kenegdo is what? That before Adam and Chava were like this, back to back, right? And then they become panim el panim, face to face. That's what neged means, face to face. So each one of these lines is neged the other one. It's not necessarily against. More appropriate in English would be vis-a-vis. One is vis-a-vis the other, okay? Gam hamalachim shem yaminu smol kenegdam tzrichim et hashalom. And we also have malachim, angels, that correspond, certainly in the world of the Bria and lower, right? The world of the Atzilut, there's no angels. But in the world of the Bria and the Yetzirah, there are angels. Most in the Yetzirah, there are a few in the Bria. But we see that the angels, we have Malache Chabala, angels of destruction, and we have angels that are for building, yes? We have Michael, that's a building angel, right? We have Gabriel, that's a destructing angel, right? So we see that there is vis-a-vis, or you want to say one is against the other, correct? Hashem makes shalom between them as well. Michael and Gabriel are they're not against each other. There's shalom between the two of them, even though they have opposite missions, right? And that's the same thing. When Jewish people come together, we have to recognize that you don't have to have the same opinion as me, okay? But the bottom line is you're still my brother. And if you're my brother, I have to love you and have peace with you, yes? We can have a discussion. We can talk together. We can share our different ideas and maybe try to influence the other one with their ideas or not. But at the end of the day, Zeh v'zeh divrei Elohim chayim, which means we understand that even things that are seemingly opposite of each other are really both correct. How are two things opposite of each other both correct? How is that possible? Well, first of all, in the Kabbalah, since we're here talking all about imagination, the imagery of what's going on in the Shamayim, it depends on the perspective. Like we've talked about, if I have a book and I ask you what are the dimensions of this book, you're going to tell me it's about 3 inches on top and about 7 inches on the bottom, right? That's what you're now. Now let's believe, instead of you looking at the book from this angle, you're looking at the book from this angle. Well, this is really 1 inch on top and 7.5 inches on the bottom. Has the book changed? No. What's changed? The perspective of how one is looking at it, okay? And that's how we can have, amongst the study of the Kabbalah, things that appear to be opposite, but are really not opposite. They're really a different perspective of the same item, okay? Even in the halacha, we have Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, right? Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel disagreed on a few things. Actually, there are 3 things that were well known to be disagreed upon, right? 3 things, I think it's 3 things. So what do we see? How do we understand? Hillel and Shammai disagreed on 3 things. Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai disagreed on lots of things. How do we understand that? Which is right? Who's right? We follow halacha like Bet Hillel, but in the time of the Mashiach, we're going to follow Bet Shammai. So it's not that Bet Shammai is wrong, okay? It's just the time is so once again, what's the perspective? You want to ask him to? Okay, let's continue. Okay, just like we have the Sfirot that are in Shalom one to each other, even though they have different missions, we have the Malachim, not missions, they have different lenses. With the Malachim, we have different missions, but they are working together. Like, think about Avraham Avinu. He sees 3 Malachim, Michael, Gavriel, and Raphael. There's no conflict between the malachim. There's no conflict. Each one has their mission to accomplish. Okay? Kedita betanchuma, like it's taught in the Midrash Tanchuma and Parashat Vayigash. What does it say there? Hamoshel upachad imo oseh shalom bin ramav. Eov. It's a pasuk in Eov. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact. I didn't look at the pasuk, so I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it properly. Ze Michael. Hamoshel. Michael is the Moshel. Pachad. This is Gavriel. Michael mean hamayim. Michael is from the mayim, which is mayim is life-giving. It is sustaining, right? Gavriel mean ha'esh. Gavriel is from esh. Esh has a couple functions. One of the functions of esh is destruction. Now, sometimes it's destruction for the purposes of building, and sometimes it's destruction.
Cleaning,
What's that?
purifying.
Purification.
Michael, it was the Moshel.
Moshel, the ruler. Michael is the governor, right? Michael is the Sar Hagadol. It's called the Sar Hagadol. First of all, we do not say the name. We only say the only angels we pronounce names are Michael, Gavriel, Raphael, Nuriel, and Uriel. Those are the only malachim, Argaman, that we pronounce names. We only say metat. So we don't say mem, tet, tet, resh, vav, nun. We say metat. Exactly. Okay, no problem. Live and learn. Okay. Some learned it already from previous experiences. Okay. Metat. Well, I like met because met means something that we don't. Yeah. No. Metat. We say metat, and this way we got it covered. We know exactly what to. And who is metat?
Job. No, Jonas.
No.
Who was the one who became?
Is an angel of destruction?
Metat, according to the understanding in the Sfarim, is Chanoch.
Yes.
Wow.
Kilakahoto Elohim. God took him, right?
God took him.
That
he didn't
metat.
want him to go off the track.
Correct. So Chanoch became metat when he was taken, right?
Wow.
Became metat. And if I'm not mistaken, metat is the senior angel responsible for the world of the Yetzirah. Michael is the senior angel that's responsible for the world of the B'riyah, if I'm not mistaken. So when we have different...
I know.
Yes. Okay. So Michael is called the Sar Hagadol. The Sar Hagadol. The now be careful about the word Gadol. It says in the Tefillah. What does it say? It says Tka b'shofar gadol lecherutenu. Translate that for me. Blow in a. So if you translate it incorrectly, please blow in the big shofar. The word gadol means big, but the word gadol also means something else. What else does it mean?
Like you're in charge.
Careful. Lecha Adonai hagedula. What is gedula? It's the word gadol, right? What is gadol? Chesed. So when we say gadol, okay, we mean chesed. Michael is the malach of Hesed. That's what it means. He's the Sar Hagadol. What does that mean? Meaning what? Sar Hagadol. What does that mean? It's not that he's the biggest angel. Angels, they don't have a size. He is the angel that ministers Chesed. That's what Michael is. Okay? And that's why it's called Sar Hagadol. So Azitaka b'shofar gadol lecherutenu. It doesn't mean God's going to blow in a big shofar. Maybe it's a big shofar, maybe it's not. He's going to blow in a shofar of chesed. What's a shofar of chesed? Az. What is az? Aleph Zayin. Az. Then. When is then? Az yimale schok pinu. Az yomru bagoyim. Az yashir Moshe. What does that mean? Az. Then. When? In the future. Okay, which is the Mashiach. So what's going to happen in the time of the Mashiach is there's going to be a shofar of chesed that is blown. And what's going to happen? Everybody's going to recognize there's one God in the world, and his name is not Allah and not Jesus. His name is Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that's going to bring in the shalom. What is Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is our, first of all, to recognize for ourselves that there is God is the king, right? But we know that all the time. A Jew, a frum Jew, an observant Jew recognizes that Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Yimloch Leolam Va'ed, God is always the Melech, right? The differences on Rosh Hashanah between Yaseh Yimei Teshuvah, his Malchut is manifest in the world, right? He comes to us with his Malchut, as opposed to normally where we have to make efforts to get close to him. On the Yaseh Yimei Teshuvah, he Kavyachol comes close to us, which means he makes the travel is easier. He makes it easier for us to connect to him, as opposed to the rest of the year when it's more difficult to connect to him because there's a distance, not really distance. And of course, what creates that distance? Sin. And when a person makes teshuvah, what do? You shorten that distance or eliminate the distance, and then you have closeness with Hashem. What's going to happen in the Mashiach is, unlike Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah is like a precursor. It's a precursor for the Mashiach. How? Because in Rosh Hashanah, we blow the shofar. Why do we blow the shofar? We're letting everybody know that there is a Melech in the world, one Melech, and his name is Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's Rosh Hashanah. And in the time of the Mashiach, that shofar is going to be blown so loud that everyone in the world, Jew and Gentile, will recognize there is one king in the world.
But Yud Kei Vav Kei is not an angel.
What's that?
Yud Kei Vav Kei is not an angel.
Of course not. Absolutely
But
not.
you just said the angel is going to be in the world in Rosh Hashanah.
I didn't say the angel. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said that. I said Michael is called Sar Hagadol, which is basically not the big angel, but the angel of Chesed. And then I said that the word Gadol doesn't mean big; it means Chesed. And then we have a concept of the shofar of Chesed that is going to be blown in the time of the Mashiach, right? Shofar az yitaka shofar gadol l'cherotenu, right? Then you will blow a big shofar for our freedom from the servitude of the nations. Instead, it's going to be the other way. Okay, on Har Sinai, what was there? Shofar, right? Because Har Sinai represents what makes the Jewish people special, the beginning of the Jewish people's specialty, Sigula, Am Sigula. What it means special? That we have a special mission. What's our mission? To proclaim God in the world. Yud Kei Vav Kei specifically. English is not so good. To proclaim Yud Kei Vav Kei in the world. That's our job. The better we do the job, the quicker the Mashiach comes. At the end of the day, if we don't do our job at the right level, what happens? Hashem is going to take care of business.
It's going to happen no matter what.
It's going to happen. It's just a question if it happens sooner or later. That's it. It's going to be on time or is it going to be early?
And how?
And how? Does it happen with miraculousness or does it happen slowly, ani rochev al chamor, like a poor person riding on a donkey, or chomriut, right? Is it going to happen in a natural way or is it going to happen in a miraculous way? That depends, okay? Depends on us. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like it's happening in a little bit of it, mostly a natural way with some intermittent special items and miraculous things, right? But it's not like it was in Egypt. Egypt was what? All miracles. The Jewish people did nothing. What did they do? They did the Korban Pesach. That was big, right? But the Makot happened. They sat back and watched. They were spectators, right? The goal is not for us to be spectators. The goal of us to be active in the world and to show the world what the truth is in all of our ways. And that's what Rosh Hashanah is. It's a proclamation, first and foremost for us, and then, of course, for the entire world that what? There is one king and one God. Okay. Continue on. Vehem omdim lifnei hashechina, and they, Michael and Gabriel, what does it mean, omdim lifnei hashechina? What is he talking about? What is the Shekhinah?
That's the presence of
Feminine
Hashem
aspect.
on this earth.
What's the sphira that corresponds? Malchut.
Malchut.
What's lifnei? Well, lifnei means before, but not in front of. It means facing, right? Da lifnei mi'ata omed. What does it mean? Kavyachol, we have to understand from before we are standing. God is higher than us. We are standing before God. The panim, what is the panim? In front of, right?
Front.
So Michael represents the chesed of the Bria, and Gavriel represents the Gevura of the Bria. And they are standing lifnei the Malchut. The Malchut is the Malchut of the Atzilut, or the Keter of the Bria, which is the same thing as the Malchut of the Atzilut. Good?
Yes.
All righty, let's continue on. And they do not cause damage one to another. Each one has their function, and their function is not a damage one to the other. Heve omer oseh shalom bimromav. This is what it means when we say oseh shalom bimromav, that even though these malachim have functions that are opposite, they're not competing one with the other. They're complementing each other. Very good. Amar Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, I'm going to assume this is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Kol harakia shel mayim v'hamalachim shel esh. All of the rakia of mayim and the malachim is esh. Sharatav esh lohet, and his servants are the burning fire. Then hamayim mechabim et esh v'lo esh tzoref et hamayim. And what do we look between mayim and esh? Fire and water have a very unique relationship. What's the relationship? Water extinguishes fire. Fire gets rid of water. So we understand that even though they have competing types of situation, they complement each other. That's the idea here. That's what it says over here. Okay? Any questions? All right, let's go back. We're now in the Shaare Orah, page Resh Yud Gimel. We're back in Rabbi Yosef Kikatilia. Veda, once again, intimate knowledge. You have to know intimately, deeply. Ki hamidah hazot nikret zikaron. That this midah is called zikaron. Let's see what he talks about in the bottom. Ubemakom hazeh niskarim kol bnei ha'olam lechol ma'asehem latov u'mutav. And in this midah, all the deeds of people are remembered for reward. Ukefish as hazikaron haba min hamakom hazeh, because zikaron comes from that makom, from that place. Kacha din nigmar al kol bnei olam. Similarly, the din, the judgment, is completed, is carried out on all the people of the world. Ulfichach nikra yom Rosh Hashanah zikaron. What do we call Rosh Hashanah? Yom HaZikaron. The Asod, what's the Sod? Rosh Hashanah hu Sod Aleph Daled Nun Yud. So right now, what did he do? He went back to the Malchut. Notice the language he used. Hamidah Hazot. What is Zot? Feminine. So he's talking here about the Malchut. The Malchut is Zikaron, right? And he says in the Malchut is Nizkarim Kol Bnei Ha'olam. Continuing on, that's the Makom. Makom is also feminine. Okay, we're good? Okay?
Also, I thought it was feminine all the time.
What?
Makom.
Yes. Well, Zikaron is from the Zot, which is the feminine, right? So remember, we're talking about the Yesod. We're not talking about the Malchut, but what he's giving us now is a little extra insight into the relationship between the Malchut and the Yesod. Let's continue on. So Rosh Hashanah is called Yom HaZikaron. Why? Why is it called Yom HaZikaron? Because it's in the secret of the name Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Aleph Daled Nun Yud corresponds to the Malchut that we've already discussed. Yes? The Yom HaZikaron who Sod El Chai. So there's Zikaron, And then there's Yom Hazikaron. Yom is masculine. So there's Zikaron, that's the Malchut, that's the Zot. That's what he started talking about. And then there is Yom Hazikaron. The word Yom makes it into the manifest. We'll see what he says inside. I don't want to say it outside. And that is the Sod El Chai. So the Zikaron is Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Yom HaZikaron is El Chai. That's the name that corresponds to the Yesod. And I knew it, he's going to go here. Because on Rosh Hashanah we are standing in judgment. That's the Malchut. That's the Aleph Daled Nun Yud. And all of our deeds and all of our items, they come before as a zikaron, feminine, Malchut, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, Lifnei Aleph Daled Nun Yud, right? The Zeu Sod Sha'anu Amrim, and this is the secret of what we say, Zochrenu Lehayim. Get the secret? Zochrenu Lehayim. Now his nosach is different than ours. We say Zochrenu Lehayim, Melech Hafetz B'Chayim. What does he say? Look at the nosach of Rabbi Yosef Kikatilia. Zochrenu Lehayim, El Melech Hafetz B'Chayim. Kotvenu beSefer Hayim leMa'anach Elohim Hayim. That's his nosach. We skip the word El. He has the word El. Zochrenu El Melech Chafetz B'Chayim. What does this mean? El Chai Umagen. So his nosach is a little different than ours. Okay. That means, so what is this talking about? What is the Chayim that we're talking about when we say Zochrenu LeChayim? El Chai. Which is the Yesod. And what are we trying to do on Rosh Hashanah? Trying to be tzaddik.
We are?
We're trying to. What is tzaddik? Yesod. Tzaddik, Yesod, Olam. The whole concept of the teshuvah is so that we become tzaddik. Now, of course, there's higher levels. There's Chassid and there's Kadosh. But the first level is tzaddik. And the goal is for a person to be considered on Rosh Hashanah as a tzaddik. If a person is a tzaddik on Rosh Hashanah, what does that mean? That he's going to have chayim. A person who is a rasha on Rosh Hashanah, assuming he doesn't change his behavior by Yom Kippur, is nichtav, is written in the Sefer of death. A person who is a tzaddik on Rosh Hashanah is written in the Sefer of Chayim. Kotvenu beSefer Chayim. Write us in the Sefer Chayim. What is Sefer Chayim? That's the Yesod. If a person is not tzaddik, they're not written in the Sefer Chayim. And therefore they're written in the Sefer.
We need to have that consciousness.
Right? And therefore, what Sefer they written? Sefer of death. The Sefer of death.
Or Be'anim, right?
Now, okay, Beinonim is
in between, and
there-
they have to Yom Kippur.
there are no Beinonim because Benoni basically means you have no place to go up or down. So it's either Hashem will make you a tzaddik by pushing down on the right side if one doesn't have the avonot of Poshei Yisrael Begufan, right? That's what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, right? That if a person doesn't put on tefillin, what happens? Then if he has those sins, Hashem will, if it's exactly even and there's no sins that are criminal with their bodies, what's going to happen? God will push down on the right side, consider the person a tzaddik, and he goes to Olam HaChaim. Right? But if he's got Poshei Yisrael Begufo, Chas v'Shalom, if he's got any of those type of avonot, Hashem doesn't do that and he goes to the burning place, which means there's no there's no even. It's either a person's going to go to Gehenam or go to Gan Eden. There's no even, right? It happens, and then you have the 10 days to change that yourself if a person is in the even side, okay? And that's why it says in the Mishnah, on Rosh Hashanah, Sifrei Chaim ve'Sifrei Metim. The books of the living and the books of the dead are open. There's a whole discussion amongst the Rishonim. What does it mean, books of the dead? How do you open up the books of the dead? They're already judged. How you judge them again? Well, they say you're judging them for the behavior of their descendants. Yes, a person can go up based on the behavior of the descendants, or chas v'shalom, maybe even go down based on the behavior of the descendants if they had influence on that, right? So the books of the living, but here we're not understanding is books of the living and books of the dead vis-a-vis led versus. We're talking about the Sefer Chaim is what? Is the Zikaron is the Malchut. That's where everything is remembered. And then Sefer Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaZikaron is the Yesod. That's what he's saying here. Zochrenu lechaim, okay, we said, umageru. Ve'amidah zot zocheret kol hanishkachot. And this midah, the midah of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, remembers all of the forgotten. Where do we say that? In Rosh Hashanah, there are 3 extra brachot. It's the longest tefillah from Musaf all year long, right? We have in Rosh Hashanah, we have Malchuyot, Zichronot, and Shofarot, right? Malchuyot, Melech HaKol Haaretz, Mekadesh Yisrael, V'Yom HaZikaron. What do we have for Zocher Habrit? What's before that? Ki Zocher Kol Hanishkachot Ata, because you remember everything that is forgotten. What does he say is the midah that is Zocher Kol Hanishkachot? The Malchut. Continuing on. The midah zot Zocher Kol Hanishkachot Lefichanu Chotmin B'Rosh Hashanah Zocher Habrit. And that's why we sign off the bracha Zocher Habrit. That is reference to the Malchut. Lefi shehu sod hazikaron v'sod habrit. This is the sod of the zikaron. Zikaron, we said, is the Malchut. And the brit. What is the brit? Yesod. Right? What does the Zohar say about a boy once he has Brit Milah? Nikrat Tzadik. Why? Because he has a mitzvah and no avonot. What do we call a person that has mitzvah, more mitzvot than avonot? We call them tzaddik. Once the baby has a Brit Milah, now he's nikrat tzaddik. Why? Because he has no avonot. It takes till he's 13 years old till he's going to get avonot, yes? But for those first 13 years, he's tzaddik. Why is he tzaddik? Because he has a mitzvah called Brit Milah. So therefore, the Brit corresponds to the Yesod.
His previous avonot went in his father.
What's that?
His previous avonot went in his father. After he's bar mitzvah, he's responsible now.
Okay.
So he's zeroed out. One mitzvah, Brit.
Yeah, listen. How old a child really has avonot? I mean, what does that mean? It's on the father. Let's the deeper meaning of that? I mean, the father carries the sin of his son. How does that work? Why is the son making mistakes?
Son can be
Emor be'amarta. What do we learn over here? There's a rabbinic obligation to do something called chinuch. If the father is not properly teaching the son, what happens? He's carrying the avonot because he's not teaching the son properly.
There's just problematic children out
Chanoch, no one ever said being a father is an easy job. Okay? No one ever said that. Okay? Chanoch lenar al pi darko. A child has to be taught according to his way, not according to the father's way. Shlomo HaMelech, my gosh, what's that?
You have to teach
the child according to his way, not according to your way, which means a father has to adjust parenting technique based on the child. A teacher has to adjust teaching technique based on the students. Same idea. It's not this is one of the biggest problems that exists in Jewish education today. We have a cookie cutter approach. Everybody's got to fit in that box, and children who don't fit in that box are thrown out to the garbage. How they will at tidin litena tadin. I don't want to call judgment on educators. You are an educator. If that's your chosen, you don't get paid enough, all that kind of stuff, that's bubba mice. At the end of the day, you chose to go into education. You are responsible for all the lives of the children that are coming underneath your aegis. Certainly, you're responsible for all the lives of the children in your community. And you have to make sure that your style of teaching and the people you hire to teach, they have the ability to adapt, to adjust to the learning abilities and learning styles of the students. It's not the other way. The student doesn't have to mold themselves to the teacher. The teacher has to mold themselves to the student. Chanoch le'nara pi darko.
That's a good teacher.
You haven't been to parent teacher conferences.
I have been to parent teachers conferences, and that's why I know for sure what I'm talking about, certainly in the schools my kids went to, was accurate. Because Baruch Hashem, I had children that didn't generally fit inside the box. And that's because, to be honest with you, their father didn't fit inside the box. So why would I expect my kids to fit inside the box? And the true leaders of the Jewish people, don't fit in the box.
David, Moshe.
They don't fit in the box. That's what makes them a leader. A person who fits in the box is a follower. Easy child to raise, generally. But that's not a leader. A leader is someone who understands that there's a box here, but I'm going to go outside the box. Never chas v'shalom doing avonot. That's not what we're talking about. But the willingness to go outside the Rambam.
Abraham was on the other side.
I mean, Avraham. He went out of the box. Rambam. Let's stay within with Jewish people. The Rambam went out of the box. When he wrote the Yad HaChazakah, that was out of the box. He writes in the introduction to the Yad, you only need 2 books to be a Jew. The Tanakh and my book. That's it. That's all you need. You don't need the Mishnah. You don't need the Talmud. You don't need that. All you need is the Tanakh. I mean, that is a bold statement. And again, the Ra'avad didn't understand. He basically said, I'm going to listen to what this person said. He missed the point. What's the point, the Ra'avad? If you're the Ra'avad, you don't need the Rambam's book. You can go to learn the Mishnah and the Gemara and study your own sources. You don't need to rely on what the Rambam is saying. You have your teacher. You've learned. But what if you don't have that? What if you didn't have exposure to good teachers? What if you were never properly taught? What do you do if you're Baal Teshuvah and you didn't have teachers for many, many years? Or you had, but you didn't think they were telling you things of value. You can be a Jew, the Rambam is saying, with the Tanakh and my book. The Yad specifically, not the Moreh. Okay, the Moreh was for the people who were confused because they didn't understand what he was talking about in the Yad. So, you don't understand? And again, his goal of writing the Moreh was really, yes, he was not happy with the perplexed. It's like he's like saying, for those who just didn't get it the first time around, let me help you around over here.
You are supposed to teach your children according to their ways, not to your ways.
That is correct. Now, that doesn't mean you teach the Torah. The goal is you have to give them over Torah. You're not diluting it. You're not telling them, oh, it's okay, you can drive to shul, it's no problem, it's okay. That's not what you're saying. You're teaching the Torah, but the way the Torah is taught has to change based on the student. You don't compromise the message, you compromise the utensil that it's delivered in. The or, there's no compromise. There's emet, that's it. Anything else is not the emet. But what you adjust is the keli.
That's why they have not go to the father's side.
Because he's supposed to be, again, that's just lanu dati. That's because the father is responsible for chinuch. The father is responsible for education.
What about the mother?
Yes, but less so. It's the father that has the responsibility. And the father is responsible for the chinuch. And if he sees that the child is not proper when they're young, he's supposed to have influence. And the influence has to be in the way the child is going to receive it. Some children, all you got to look at them in a certain way and they're done. They're galat semot, they're finished. Other children need a little bit more stimulation. They need punishment. They need timeout. They need restriction of certain things, right? Most of the time, it's better to do it from reward rather than restriction. If you do this, I'm going to give you this reward. If you don't do it, you're not going to get a reward. That's the way. That's a positive way of teaching. But you have to adjust the teaching style based on the student. Good?
Yes.
All right. Continuing on, and that's the brit. What is the brit? We say, Anu chotmim b'shnei elu anyanim zocher brit. What are we hinting to? Zocher is the malchut. The brit is the yesod. That's what he's saying here on Rosh Hashanah. Because David HaMelech wanted to attach himself to which midah? To the midah of, no, zot. He wanted to attach himself to midah of malchut. Why? Because David HaMelech represents malchut. Yes? Haya omer, mizmor le David lehazkir. So he has a mizmor in the Tehillim for lehazkir, meaning what? For the malchut. Not for the malchut, but how to have that connection to the malchut. That was David's goal. Wow. Wow. I'm going to go a little bit ahead in the Shaare Orah to continue on this idea, and then we're going to come back to the bottom. The Zeu Sod Azkarata Shel Minha. What is Azkarata? We'll see what it says in the bottom. What's that?
Remember, they're remembering her.
Where do we see that?
Shavuot.
Where do we say Azkarata?
Sorry, I'm thinking of the Azharot and Shavuot. There's something Azharot maybe between Rosh Hashanah, Mincha.
Okay, that's something else. That's something else. Where's that word Azkarata? One second. Okay, he's going to explain on the bottom. We'll get to it. What words in Azkarata? Zachor. Zikaron. Azkarata. What is that? Feminine. What do we say Zikaron is? Feminine. The Sod Minhat Zikaron Maskeret. How can you understand the Peshat of the Torah without the Sod? There is no way. We have the Mincha that is brought by the Sotah, right? The wayward woman, right? What does it say? We're going to read a couple of parashot from now. What does it say? Minchat Zikaron Maskeret Avon. How does the Torah call this? Minha. Why is it minha? Because it's from barley. It's from vegetable. Minha. It's a sacrifice of vegetable. Zikaron. What is zikaron? Feminine. Yes. Zikaron. Mazkeret avon. Why is the Torah squeezing in here the concept of zikaron? Let's see what he says. Shachet shel isha sota. The sin of the woman that's a sota. What does the word sota mean? Exactly. No.
Lahasit is
to turn away. Lasit is from the word to turn away. She turned away from her husband. To get side action. Oh. And what do we say about the malchut? When she's not properly receiving shefra from above, either on the side of chesed or on the side of din, what does she then do? She turns to get side action. When the husband is not properly treating his wife by giving her the things that he is required to give her, intimacy, she'era, and kesuta, what does she do? She basically is not receiving shefa, so what does she do? That's called the sota. And she complete. It's not good, but the husband has some culpability. And that's why what happens if she is innocent and she drinks from the water, she gets what she was missing. What does it mean she was missing? If she doesn't have children, she has children. Why isn't the husband paying attention to her? Because she has no children. If she was beforehand ugly, she becomes beautiful.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Why isn't the husband paying attention to her? Because she doesn't look, she's not beautiful. So it's a reward for her because it's a message to the husband. You weren't paying attention to her.
Now look. Now look.
That's what
Now you
happened.
are.
And even though she didn't make this, if she made the sin, she dies. Okay,
If she's innocent. What
but
does
if
the
she's
husband get?
innocent, what's that?
What does the husband get? Husband doesn't get anything.
Husband gets a beautiful wife or a wife that's going to give birth
So
to
he
sons.
gets a reward. What punishment does he get if he's somewhat culpable for causing this?
The goal is for him to recognize why,
Wake up.
and to. That's exactly right.
Look what you've been missing.
Look what you've been missing. Okay? Minhat zikaron. Meaning what? If she sinned, that sin is contained in the zikaron. That's what we said. The aleph daled nun yud, the malchut, is what retains that zikaron. And if she didn't sin, then the husband has to realize what his culpability is. Why did she go there? Why did she give the appearance that she was going for? Because when a woman didn't sin, it's not that she didn't sin, didn't do anything wrong. What does it mean? She went alone with another man, and there were witnesses. She's not innocent. Now, if she went alone with another man to have relations, she dies. If she went alone, why else would she go alone with another man and not have relations?
Buying her husband a birthday present. that
She wants to
something
become-
crazy
She
like
wants
that.
her husband to pay attention. It's the oldest trick in the book.
Jealousy.
Okay, it's the oldest trick in the book, and that's why it's called kin'ah. He has jealousy. Why is he jealous? Because she went with why is she going with another man? What am I not giving her that she's now going with another man? It's a self-reflection.
Can she do this trick? Go with another man, have the witnesses, not do anything, have the whole sota ceremony.
And
She's
what's the
innocent.
risk? The risk is sometimes when people go alone, one thing leads
You
to
get
another.
burned. You get burned.
You get burned, and then the burn is bad. Okay, so no burning, no bad, right? So continuing on, and this is what he says over here, continuing on, the sotabi becomes talul lihipara, which means she's going to be punished. If she made the sin, if she deviated off the side and she made the sin, it's going to be visited on her. Kimin hat kenaot hu, because it's a vegetable offering of jealousy. Continuing on, that's the exact pasuk, the pasukim, that's exactly what they say. Ubimkom zehi hakin'ah. And in this place, there is kin'ah. The siman, kin'at Adonai tzevaot. Kin'at yud kevavke tzevaot. What is yud kevavke tzevaot? That is the netzach. We'll learn that soon. Okay? Upikdonot harehen kezichronot. What is a pikadon? An accounting. Vadonai pakadet Sarah kasher diber. What does it mean, pakad? Remembered her. So we see the word a pikadon and a zikaron are cousins of each other. Continuing on. That's what it says in the Gemara, by the way, Rosh Hashanah. Ufikdonot harehen kezichronot. Okay? Ella shapikdonot al. There's a whole shakla and tarya amongst the Rishonim. Why doesn't say Hashem zachar et Sarah kasher diber? Why does it use the word pakad? If the Gemara is saying that these words are similar, why is one word chosen and the other word not? You have an answer to that?
Pakod is stronger than Zachar.
Is that true?
Pakod yifkod etchem, pekudei, the parsha.
Okay.
Counting.
Zachor dasher asalacha amalek baderech betzetechem b'mitzrayim. It doesn't say pakod.
Well, Zachar.
And when God is going to remember about when God's going to take care of Amalek in the end, what does he say? It's all zikaron. It's all zachor. There's no pakod.
More positive.
Is that true? Pakod?
Yifkod Sarah, pakod yifkod etchem, and you'll take me out of Egypt.
There's also pikidan avonot as well. No, it's not always positive. Now let's talk sod. Pikdonot al yedei aleph daled nun yud. Pikdonot are by the way of the Shem of Aleph Daled Nun Yud, the Zichronot al Yedei El Chai.
El Chai is Yesod,
Yes.
and Al Benudud is.
So why Hashem pakad et Sarah? Why pakad?
You need.
What was wrong with Sarah Imenu?
Her malchut was missing something. She was akara.
She was Ailonit.
What? She was what?
She was Ailonit. That's what it says.
Akara.
There's a difference between akara and Ailonit.
I never heard of this word.
Okay?
From Ayav.
Rashi, what does the Torah say? The Torah says, Sarai eshet Avram akara en la valad. And Sarai, the wife of Abraham, was barren. She had no child. What's the question? If she's barren, of course she has no child. If she has no child, then she's barren. Why do I need both words? So look at Rashi. What does Rashi say? What does it mean, en la valad? En la bet valad. She had no uterus. She had no womb. She was Ailonit. She was functionally a man, even though she had certain equipment on the outside. On the internal part, she was missing. Now let's talk sod. She's missing the keli. The woman has a keli that allows her to hold and store the child. It's called the uterus. Yes?
To take something and make it better.
So now, why is the word pakad used here? Because what she's given in order to have a child is a uterus. She's given the keli. That's malchut. Yes. Why is it pakod yivkod Elohim etchem? Why is it zachor ziza? Why is the language pakod yivkod? I'm just guessing, but I think it sounds correct. Why is the lashon given pakod yivkod? They're leaving Egypt. Why are they leaving Egypt?
Because they're ready to go.
Really?
If they stayed more, they would be in the 50th level.
What is the goal of Yetziat Mitzrayim?
To get to the Torah.
Aha.
To receive the Torah.
To become the keli to receive the Torah.
That's the reason to leave the Mitzrayim.
Correct. So the Jewish people could be the keli to receive the Torah on Har Sinai. That's the holiday of Shavuot.
And the whole process from Pesach to Shavuot.
What is the Shabbat before Shavuot called?
That's the purpose of creation.
What is the Shabbat before Shavuot called? Shabbat Kala.
It is?
Yes. Why Shabbat Kala? Because we are the Kala. We are the feminine. We are receiving the Torah on Har Sinai. We are becoming married. We are the feminine. And then becoming the feminine, what does that mean? V'atem tiyuli mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. We're going to be the manifestation of the Torah in the world is through us. What's that called? Malchut. We are going to function. What is the difference between before the Mashiach and after Mashiach? Before the Mashiach, we are shi'ibud malchuyot. We are underneath the yoke of the nations. After the Mashiach comes, they are under our yoke. We become the melech, the malchut.
Were they under us? We're under Hashem.
Right now, we are under them.
But we're also under Hashem.
Yes, but the physical manifestation in the world, what's out there for everybody to see, is that we are under them. When Israel has to kowtow to what America wants because, they should just take care of Gaza once and for all and that's it, then who's in charge? Who's the king and who's the slave? And I promise you, in the current government, whether it's a right government or left government, they will not get it. The only way we will be able to assume the yoke of rule is with Melech HaMashiach. We need a Melech. His name is the Mashiach.
Monarchy.
What's that?
Monarchy. A holy
The monarchy, exactly. That's what the Mashiach is, the reestablishment of Jewish monarchy. That's what the Mashiach is. And that's another reason why the Christians missed the point.
At the world level.
At the world level, if the Jewish people are not the Melech of the world, if it's Donald Trump is considered to be the Melech of the world, we can know one thing for sure. Mashiach is not here yet. Now, what he's doing is an amazing thing because he's trying to bring peace in the world and all that kind of stuff. That's good stuff. But he is not the Mashiach. And the proof that he's not, the Mashiach's not here yet, is that we have a Gentile that's the leader of the world. When we have a frum Jew who's the leader of the world, then that's the Mashiach.
Lieberman.
No,
Not
no,
from,
no,
but
no,
he's Jewish.
no, no, no. I told you, Mashiach comes, everybody in the Israeli government gets fired. All of them. None of them will be used. None of them will be used in the government of the Mashiach, I promise you. They are tainted goods, all of them. If anything else, just because they participated in a government that was not following the Torah. Mashiach is going to be uncompromising in the Torah. There's no such thing as a compromise in the Torah.
Well, how do you have religious representation?
How much of a compromise was Moshe Rabbeinu?
What do you mean?
Was he a compromiser? Was Moshe Rabbeinu a compromiser?
Only in terms of not slow.
That was not a compromise. Think about Moses. Think about what we read about how he acts in the Torah. Chet ha'egel. Did he compromise? No. Whoever did the egel
Gets the microphone.
gets killed. Very simple. And who kills them? Levi. And then he feeds the egel to all the Jewish people. So anyone who had thoughts in their head about Avodah Zarah dies, like the Sotah. Why? God is El Kana. There is no room for compromise. The Sotah. There's no room for compromise. She is brought to the Bet HaMikdash, and she's asked a very simple question. Did you sin? If she says yes, she doesn't drink from the water. He gives her a get. No ketubah. Off she goes. Fine, no
She
problem.
survives.
She lives.
So only if she
It's
denies
only
it,
if she denies it
she has to drink.
that she has to drink the water. And if she drinks the water and she denied it and she did it, she dies. If she drinks the water and she denied it and she didn't do it, she lives. There's no compromise. There's no option here. It's option. You did it or not. You did it. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Off you go. No get, no ketubah. You get a get. Okay? You did it. You say you didn't do it. Drink the water. We're going to prove it. There's no compromise. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't compromise. When Korach made a rebellion against him, there was no compromise. He didn't say, you know what? He said, Boker, tomorrow morning we're going to see. Okay? He didn't want to do it at night because we don't make judgments at night, especially Dinei Nefashot. We have to wait till the next morning. Okay? Let's see if they go home and talk to their righteous women. If their righteous women are going to tell them they're off their rocker. Whose life did he save by doing that? On.
Wait, who's on?
On Ben Pelet. He wasn't part. He was initial part of the rebellion, and then he wasn't part of it. He didn't die because his wife saved him. The rest of them, their wives didn't save them. And that's why Korach and his family, including his wife,
And his children.
all died, except for two one was saved, or two was saved, right? But Moshe is not a compromise agent. Moses is not a compromise agent. Moses is a man of truth, a man of law. That's it. Who's the compromise agent? Aaron. And that got him into trouble. Chag LaHashem machar. Okay. So, again, both are needed. The Mashiach is not going to be a compromise agent. The Mashiach is going to be a man of the law, of the Torah. No compromise. What does it say in the Torah? That's it. That's the end of the story. I don't care Turkish law, British law, Israeli law, American law. I don't. It's all that's garbage. What does it say in the Torah? How can a person be in the government of the Mashiach if they compromised in their life by joining a government that's again? Again, I'm not saying they're wrong for joining the government. I think the right wing is very important to be part of the government because otherwise the left wing gets everything. I get it. But what I'm saying is that's a taint that I don't think is going to allow these people to join the government of the Mashiach.
Even if they did it on right.
Even if they did it because
even like the Shas.
Yeah. You always get your hands a little dirty. When you're in politics, you get your hands dirty. That's the way it goes. Okay. Let's go back. Okay. Let's go back. Zikaron. Bi'eh ha-pardes, pardes rimonim, ramak, shar kaf gimel, kol ha-mefarshim hiskimu heyot ha-zechira b'yesod. All of the mefarshim seem to agree that the zechira is in the yesod, ki hu ha-mazkir kol ha-devarim lamala b'makom ha-chaim. Because the yesod is what causes there to be a mazkir, a remembrance of all the items above in the place of the chaim. What is makom hachayim? That language. Makom hachayim. Translate that for me. Makom is
place.
Makom is feminine.
Okay.
Chayim.
It's masculine.
What is the feminine source of life? No. No.
The woman itself.
What is when we took Mikor HaChayim, the source of the Chayim? What is the source of the Chayim? In the Sfirot. Bina! Tzror HaChayim. What is Tzror HaChayim? The bundle of life. That's the Bina. So when it says Makor HaChayim, be Makor HaChayim, this is the Bina. V'zeu zochrenu l'chayim b'Rosh Hashanah. What are we looking to do? We're looking to draw Chayim, life, B'nei Hayeh Mezoneh, children, health, and sustenance, from the Bina. Continue. V'chen zichron teruah shehu b'yom HaShabbat. What does the Torah say? The Torah calls it, we read it this week's parasha, by the way. What do we read in this week's parasha? Parashat Emor. In one place it says, Yom Teruah Yelachem. In the parasha we read yesterday, it says, Zichron Teruah Yelachem. Why does the Torah give us two different words? One place it says, Yom Zikaron. The other place it says, Yom Teruah Yelachem. And the other place it says, Zichron Teruah Yelachem. Why is that? Why is the Torah doing that? You understand the question first. Let's make sure we understand the question. Charlie, understand the question?
Why is there three different ways of doing it?
There's two. The Torah says there's two things. There's Yom Teruah Yelachem. It's going to be day of Teruah, a day of blowing. And the other one is Zichron Teruah. Both of them referring to Rosh Hashanah. So let's talk on the Peshat level. We're not talking about the Sod yet. On the Peshat, why those two words? Why does the Torah call it Yom Teruah? And in last week's Parashat, Emor, it's called Zichron Teruah. Why is that? Because there's an asmachta that the rabbis use to say that on Rosh Hashanah, when it falls on Shabbat, we do not blow shofar. What's the asmachta? What is the pasuk they're relying on for there? It's not a Torah prohibit. The Torah says you blow shofar on Shabbat. There's no question about it. The rabbis came along and said, no, you're not going to blow shofar on Shabbat. What is the asmachta? What is the hint in the Torah? Zichron teruah. What does that mean? There's going to be a day of Rosh Hashanah where you're just going to remember what the shofar sounds like. Why are you going to remember? Because you're not going to hear it. Why you're not going to hear it? Because it's Shabbat and the rabbis told you can't blow. So you see, within the Torah is built this concept that you're not blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah when it falls on Shabbat.
Is there one for Sukkot somewhere? Where
I'm not aware. Not aware of that.
Does every Keilah hold like that?
Maybe not
Since the
carrying.
destruction of the second, probably maybe even the first temple.
You don't blow the shofar.
Okay, so that's a.
You have to remember it.
So are you asking for a reason? Because I want to make sure we have the same understanding. Are you asking for a reason specifically? Okay, so since the destruction of the, if I'm not mistaken, the first temple, maybe the second, I'm not 100% sure which one. What's missing? No, in the second temple they did. What's missing now?
The korbanot.
We're missing a Bet HaMikdash. Yes, that's clear.
Yeah.
When the Bet HaMikdash is another feature of the Bet HaMikdash. It's not only the temples for sacrifices. That's the feature, the Kohanim, all that kind of stuff. Yes, okay, Korbanot. What's another feature of the Bet HaMikdash? All that's related to sacrifices. What about the Bet HaMikdash has to do with? Yes. Lishkat HaGazit. Okay? Why is the Sanhedrin sitting in Lishkat? What does Lishkat HaGazit mean? What does the word Gazit mean? Hew. They sat in a room that was made from hewn stones. What do we know about the Mizbeach? No, Mizbeach cannot be made from hewn stones. Oh, Lot, it says, if you give me the Mishpatim, we'll see. Lot iten ein gazit. I don't know the exact lashon. It cannot be gazit. Ki harbecha hainafta alea v'techal alea. Which means you cannot make the Mizbeach made from stones that are cut. Because why? The goal of the Mizbeach is to do what? To bring shalom between the Jewish people and God. And you cannot have a situation where a utensil called a knife or a sword or a stone is cutting a stone, because that's the opposite of shalom. Now, why does the Sanhedrin sit in Lishkat HaGazit, which means the vestibule they were in was specifically made from hewn stone? Because the job of the Sanhedrin is to cut the halakha. And when you cut the halakha, someone goes away upset. In a betin, when they rule, you have two litigants. Someone goes away happy and someone goes away upset. That's not shalom. That's judgment. What is shalom? When there is a settlement that doesn't have to go to the betin. So therefore, the Sanhedrin sits in the Bet HaMikdash in Lishkat HaGazit. Because at the end of the day, their responsibility is to cut the halakha and to say what it is and what it's not. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. No compromise. The Mizbeach, what does that represent? Aharon. Compromise. Because that's where you have shalom. Now, coming back to your question. Why did the rabbis forbid us to blow shofar on Shabbat?
So you don't carry it.
You're going to carry it not to blow it. You're going to carry it so that you can learn from someone how to blow it. That's what the exact language is. They prevented you from blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah because maybe there's going to be someone who's going to carry the shofar to a teacher to learn how to blow it. So therefore, no one carries. Why would a student carry the shofar on Shabbat with no eruv? Why would that be something they would do? When the Sanhedrin is sitting in Lishkat HaGazit, then we have the Sanhedrin of 23 that's in every city. Yes? There's three levels of courts. The courts of 3, the courts of 23, and the courts of 71. Right?
Right.
Okay? If the court of 71 is not sitting in Lishkat HaGazit, The court of 23 cannot rule on corporal or capital
The
cases.
71 has to be sitting there.
Uh-huh. That's why we only have nowadays bet din of 3, which is mamonot, money. We do not have a bet din that's giving people lashes for eating pork. We don't have a bet din that's giving people sikila if they mehalel Shabbat publicly. That doesn't exist. Why? Because this Bet HaMikdash is destroyed. There's no Sanhedrin sitting in Lishkat HaGazit. Therefore, there's no 23. That means that what?
You can only rule on monetary matters?
Can only rule on monetary matters, which means the Bet Din has no jurisdiction on capital offenses. If the Bet Din has no jurisdiction on capital offenses, it makes it much more likely that someone is going to carry a shofar in the public thoroughfare on Shabbat. Because if the Bet Din was sitting in Jerusalem and there was a court of 23 in the city, a Jew would go to this Jew and say, "Hello, this is Shabbat Hayom. You're walking in the Reshut Harabim. If you don't stop right now and drop the shofar, we go to Bet Din, you die tomorrow." So there's a morah, there's a fear of the Bet Din, which doesn't exist today. In fact, now people don't even fear the Bet Din of 3. That's why they go to the Gentile court. Oy va'avoy. Just look what the Shulchan Aruch has to say about that. NG complete. A Jew who takes a fellow Jew to a Gentile court without the authorization of the Bet Din, the Shulchan Aruch says, Sholeach yad betorat Moshe. A Jew who takes a fellow Jew to a Gentile court without first getting permission from the Bet Din to take them to a Gentile court, it says, Sholeach yad betorat Moshe. He's basically causing chas v'shalom damage, or he's inflicting damage to the Torah of Moshe. Why? Because he's basically saying the Gentile court is better than the Torah. What's that called right now? Israeli society. What is Israeli society? I don't care that all the Supreme Court justices and the judges are Jewish. If the judgments they are making is not exclusively based on the Torah, it's called a Gentile court.
Does that go for the?
And that's why a Gentile court, even if it rules exactly like the Torah does, you cannot bring them to the Gentile court. It's still Sholeach Yad B'Torat Moshe. And the Shulchan Aruch has very, very strong language. Very strong language. Okay? When a person gets a divorce, the Gentile court means nothing, because he's still married to the woman until he gives her a get. I promise you, there is no Gentile court in this country that assists a Jew in giving his wife a get. There are some states that have a law that before you can come to a Gentile court to talk about divorce, you have to have given your wife a get, a religious divorce. There are states like that. Okay?
Do they know what?
They make you bring the doc. They make you bring proof.
To whatever your religion you're at.
Again, specifically on the, I don't know about the Muslims yet because they had not here long enough, okay? But on the Jewish side, there are states that have laws like this, okay?
So they know about the get.
Just like a person cannot get married, okay? They can get married, but they have to have a, 1 second. No, I don't want to say that. Let's leave that alone. Why are we bringing that up?
Okay, so there's no,
So,
there's no fear that they're not
in a
gonna-
situation
The
where,
Supreme Court isn't derived from the Torah.
No.
The
Oh,
governing
no.
governing
All
laws
the
aren't derived from Judeo-Christian values.
once you
So
say
they don't have a derivative.
Christian,
I mean,
you're already off the path. We don't care what the Christians have to say. All we care about what does the Torah have to say. What the Christians have to say has no meaning. Or the Turks, or the Brits, or whatever other laws the Israeli government put together when they established themselves as a secular a secular government, whatever laws they relied on, British and Turkish law, that's how they did it. Very nice. That is not the Torah. Even if it says the same thing as the Torah says, it is not the Torah. Now, coming back to your question. It's said that the Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak Al-Fasi in Fez, Morocco, his Bet Din, even though he didn't do capital and corporal punishments, was takif, was strong, was very, very strong, which means the general people had a fear or an awe of the Bet Din of the Reef. So the Reef allowed them to blow shofar on Shabbat in his place. Why? Because they had the fear of the Bet Din. Because the Bet Din has other tools at its disposal. If a person is mehalel Shabbat publicly, what can the Bet Din do? They can't kill him. They can't lash him. What can they do? Put him in cherem. And in the good old days, in the Middle Ages, a Jew in cherem was in a very bad place. Because a Jew in cherem meant what? No aliyah, no minyan, nobody doing business with them, nobody marrying their kids, which means, and they have to move out of the, and if they go and move with the Gentiles, what happens? They don't do all that well. So there was a protection when they lived in the Jewish community to some extent. Do you know what the Orthodox, the Shomer Shabbat rate in the ghetto was?
The European ghettos?
In any of the ghettos?
0.
90.
Shomer Shabbat? No, 95% was Shomer Shabbat.
That's what I meant. I mean, there was no.
Why?
I thought you
Because
wanted
if a
to-
person was Mehalel Shabbat, what happens?
You don't want to be.
They
kicked
give him a
out.
warning.
You don't
If
want
he
to be kicked out of the
does
house.
it again, they put him to cherem, they kick him out. He's got to go live with the guy, and the guy will kill him. So what's that called? Morah betin. So the answer to your question is, with that exception that I just brought up, bottom line is there's no shofar on Shabbat because people don't have proper awe of the betin. And in Amarika, for sure that's the case.
That makes sense.
But there's cherem today, a little bit.
And how powerful is the cherem?
It's not about
The
eating
rabbis
food.
in Boca Raton put a Jew into cherem. What does he do? He picks himself up and he goes to Los Angeles, or he goes to New York, or he goes to Milwaukee, okay? And nobody knows anything.
How is that possible? Social media and internet and communication.
Okay, well, that's getting better now because the publication of the information is becoming much easier,
Back then it wasn't. But
okay? Just to tell you how to level it out, maybe I shouldn't say it.
Goyim were meaner back then. Ruthless back then.
There's a certain rabbi that basically was a rabbi of a synagogue for a number of years, and unfortunately he became a little weak in a certain area where you're allowed to fire a rabbi based on that. Weak with women, okay? Orthodox shul. We said the other week, people fail in lots of things, right? Gezel, most in Gezel. Mu'atam ba'arayot. He had a weakness in this particular area. So what did the shul do? They fired him, rightfully so. There's no contract, there's no severance, no nothing, just out, gone, okay? And they told him, we won't publicize it as long as you do not apply for a rabbinic position in any other shul.
In the world. In the United States. In the state.
As we don't want to hear
That you're a
that
rabbi
you're
somewhere.
applying to be a rabbi anywhere else. Because once we hear you're applying for a rabbi and everywhere else, not only are we going to call them, we're going to let everybody know.
Yeah, Thailand.
So what did he do? He thought that 1,500 miles was far enough away that they wouldn't find out about it. Well, they found out about it. And what they do? They called the rabbis of that community 1,500 miles away. And they said, we're going to tell you a little bit about what's going on here. And he didn't get the job. His rabbinic days are over. He could still be a teacher, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not sure you'd want him to teach women. Okay, maybe he could teach men. Well, he wasn't gay.
How
Okay,
did you tshuva for that?
what's that? You could do tshuva for it, but you've lost your ability to be a
You
rabbi.
have no carrera.
You've lost that. You're not getting that back. It's like a person who has a restaurant and they find that there's being trephos in there. Okay, that's great. You're never
Or
getting.
rats.
You're never going to be able. You're never
Yeah,
going to have a
that's what I get.
restaurant again. Rats you can clean up. Trephos you ain't cleaning up.
So that you buy from the wrong
That's
place.
a display of a weakness that no one wants to have as a rabbi of a shul. And we don't have that rabbi of a shul. Cannot be involved in thievery, cannot be involved in sexual indiscretion. That's just not negotiable. That's a termination on the spot, no questions asked. Have a nice day. What's that called? No compromise.
No negotiation.
No negotiation. That's not Aharon. That's Moshe. Okay? So now, just come back here. So you see over here, how did we get onto the whole topic? So you asked about that, right? So I talked about the fact that One second. Zochreinu l'chaim b'Rosh Hashanah. Okay. V'chen zichron teruah. That's how we went into this topic. The Torah says zichron teruah. We read it in Parashat Emor, right? Shu b'yom Shabbat. It's a remez. The Torah is giving you a hint. Now, let's understand this. Ideally, we don't blow shofar on Shabbat. For a situation we don't blow shofar on Shabbat. Why is there no Bet HaMikdash? Because we didn't follow it properly. So the Torah, since God has the panoramic view of history, he knows fully well that there's going to be a time in history where there's going to be no temple. In fact, there are prophets that talk about the time when there's no temple and there's no sacrifices. So therefore, built into the Torah is a hint to this concept of Zichron Teruah. Okay? That's on the Peshat level. Now let's go to the Kabbalah level. Okay? Shehu b'yom HaShabbat, Yesod v'chulei. V'kvar efshar hayot perush zechira lashon zachar. And therefore we can understand the word zechira. What is the shoresh of the word zechira? Yechezkel. What is the shoresh of the word zechira? Zachar. What is zachar? Ben. Yesod is masculine. In fact, Yesod, when you think about the Komat Ha'adam, what does the Yesod represent? In the makeup of the man, if we think about how the Sirot corresponds to the different limbs of the human body. No.
You're a male member.
Male member.
Yes, I was afraid to say it.
Yesod is and the word for that in Hebrew, because there is no word in biblical Hebrew that talks about the member.
So modern slang.
It's all modern slang. Whatever you want to say in modern Hebrew, it's nonsense. The word, there is no word. It's called zichrut, which means masculinity. When we're referring to the limb of masculinity, that should be very clear what we're talking about. When it says that Pinchas killed Zimri and Cosbi, what does it say? Through zichruto, not in the Torah, in the rabbis. It went through zichroto, through his zachar into hers. Because what is that necessary? Because the kanai can only kill them sha'at ha'ma'aseh. He can only kill them while they're in the act. Once they're not in the act, once he separates from her, then he's not allowed to kill them. So what does Pinchas do? He wants to show that what? That he killed them in the act. So he stabs them through and through, his you-know-what and her you-know-what, lifts them up, and now they're on the staff, and everybody sees what they were involved in exactly, and they're still there.
Because if it would have gone heart to heart,
Then they would have separated.
So you need to
And
show
it shows you that when he came into the room, the natural instinct, if people are engaged in relations, even if they're holy relations, if God forbid someone runs into the room, stop. A person that's tzniut, a person that's not allowed to have relations in front of someone else, yes? This Rasha, even when Pinchas comes into the room, doesn't separate.
It happened so fast you didn't notice. How big are tents?
I don't know. You open up the tent, suddenly light comes into the tent. It wasn't there before. Right? So the light comes into the tent. You see something going on. Your first reaction is to separate. He didn't do that because he was Rasha. And that allowed Pinchas to kill him.
Really long spear.
That's correct. Okay, so we see that there's no word in Hebrew for the member. It's called zichrut.
Or brit.
Or brito. Yeah, it's hinting. We're hinting. We're not saying it specifically. The same thing with the woman. It's called makor dameha, the source of her blood. What's that referring to? The uterus. En la valad. She has no uterus. How does the Torah say that? En la valad. Right? It's hinting. It's not saying it outright. Mimikor damea, gila ervata. He uncovered her nakedness. We know what that's talking about when it says uncovering nakedness. But the way the Torah addresses it is to uncover nakedness, euphemistically. It hints to it. It doesn't say it outright. Why? Because it's Lashon HaKodesh. Modern Hebrew is not Lashon HaKodesh. It is not. Lashon HaKodesh is Lashon HaKodesh. And that's why there are people who only speak. Why do the Hasidim only speak Yiddish?
They don't want to use Hebrew for something
Yes.
other than prayer.
Yes. They will use a language that's a combination of Hebrew and German, which it's diluted, okay, to talk about mundane things, but they won't speak in Hebrew because they don't want to use Lashon HaKodesh for mundane things.
How do you teach your kids?
That's profound.
Isn't that profound?
You got to get your kids to know the grammar and know this and know how to speak when they're going to Hebrew school. So you
Okay, first, if they grow up in Israel, they don't need to learn the grammar because they learn the grammar by just
So is
listening.
this a good shita? Is their shita have some kind of mahut? Because it's a holy tongue. You want to use it for prayer or for learning.
That's a little bit of the battle I have sometimes. Listen, sometimes I make mistakes because I'm not a born Hebrew speaker, so Zachar and Nekeva is always complicated for me. But there are other times when I'm speaking Hebrew of the language of the Torah or the language of the Chachamim.
And the Israelis are arguing.
And the Israelis are arguing with me. And what they're not catching is I'm speaking Lashon HaKodesh and they are not. Brand new words, okay? That's not Lashon
And this
HaKodesh.
follows all the grammar rules.
Again, grammar rules, shmammer rules. I don't care about that. There's the Hebrew of the Torah. There's the Hebrew of the Mishnah. There's the Hebrew of the Chachamim. The Chachamim kept Hebrew alive for 2,000 years until Bar Ilan. Okay? Whatever, Ben Yehuda, Bar Ilan, whoever it is that decided that they're going to make up new words in the Hebrew language because we needed more specificity. Kol HaKavod, they borrowed banana and all these things from other languages because there was no Hebrew word for that. Okay, Hebrew is a very small lexicon. There's very few words in the Hebrew language. Maybe 5,000, 7,000 compared to English was 30, 40,000. Therefore, one word can mean many things, right? Think about that. One word can mean many things. We have Kiddusha, holiness, and they have something that's called a Kedesha. What is a Kedesha? A Kedesha is not a holy woman. It's a Jewish woman that takes money for sexual favors. That's called Kedesha. Same word. Okay, so Hebrew has a limited lexicon, which first and foremost means that when you read the Torah, you have to understand the context. You read the Tanakh, you have to understand the context because it lends itself to misinterpretation because of that. And that's if you're reading it in Hebrew. Forget about if you translate it into another language, then whatever the translator understands to be the case. And then not only are you translating it from another language, you're translating it from a translation. Which means you have the Septuagint, which were created by the Christian church. The original Septuagint no longer exists. That was burned in the fire of Alexandria. The original Septuagint was only on the 5 books of Moses. It wasn't on the Tanakh. And what the Christians did is because most of their people were Greek speakers and they wanted them to understand the sources for many of the things in the New Testament, they basically created a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. They called it the Septuagint, but it wasn't the Septuagint of the rabbis. It was made by the Christians. And why did they do that? Because they wanted to support the nonsense that's said in Matthew about what it says in the Bible. So they made the Septuagint. That's why if you look in the Septuagint, the word for virgin doesn't appear there. I'm sorry, the word for alma, it says virgin. It doesn't say alma, young woman. It says virgin in the Septuagint. Why? Parthenos. Why? Because their goal was to tell you that the young woman's going to give birth to a... In the Septuagint.
They made a mistake.
They didn't make a mistake.
That's what
They didn't make a mistake. It's criminal behavior from a theological point of view. That's not a mistake. That's purposely done.
Censorship.
That's not censorship. That's changing the word to fit your definition.
So you're censoring the real word.
Censorship can also be for protection point of view. Okay? This is criminal. What the rabbis did when they censored the Talmud wasn't criminal. It's so that they could publish the Talmud in a Christian publication house, and there weren't things that are obviously against Jesus because that would have been a problem. That's not criminal. That's needed in order to be able to publish the Talmud. What they're doing is criminal. They are changing the pasuk. They're changing the meaning. They're cutting the pasuk. They're They're changing it around. That's criminal. That's theological crime. Okay? So then the Septuagint was translated into Latin,
The Vulgate.
the Vulgate. And then 1,200, 1,300 years later, it was translated into English, King James. So you have a translation of a translation of a translation, okay? And nobody really cared what does the real Hebrew have to say.
No, they wanted to adapt it to their
Exactly.
needs,
So
and their views.
more, shall we say, progressive Bibles, Christian Bibles, are trying to be faithful to the original Hebrew. So if you look at certain Bibles, it'll say the young woman will give birth to a child, which means the translation of Alma is the same as it's translated in other places as young woman.
No,
It's not virgin. And then they will say on the bottom, this is the original word in Hebrew. And if you want to interpret that as a virgin, kol hakavod, don't change the word. And the reason they do that is because Matthew mistranslated, Matthew was written in Greek, mistranslated the word Alma, virgin. Here the virgin will give birth to a son, and you should call him Emmanuel. Multiple mistranslations in that pasuk, because Matthew was advancing a claim, and he was basing it on the Hebrew Bible. What's the problem? He didn't read Hebrew.
How would they look at you will not worship a stone and wood? And be like, well, he was crucified on a...
I have no idea. I have no idea. Let's continue on. Let's go back.
The real Septuagint by the rabbis. That's like an Onkelos. That's a good translation.
That's a translation of the 5 books of Moses only, not of the entire Tanakh, right? And that's a translation into Greek. Onkelos is a translation into Aramaic. Aramaic is a Semitic language. Aramaic has, it's a cousin of Hebrew. Greek is not.
Okay. But
so if you read it in Aramaic, you can have a better understanding sometimes of the Hebrew. At least you can understand how Onkelos is translating it.
I'm saying, if you had your hands on that, the original Septuagint, it would be fine for you to read if you understood ancient Greek. It's more...
the rabbis wrote it because it was specifically written for Goyim.
For Greek? Oh.
Or Jews who...
Greek-speaking Jews.
Were Goyishly inclined culturally. Let's understand this.
They were some of the early Christians.
If you have a frum Jew, what is the likelihood they don't, again, that back then, I'm not talking about now because now we had 2 or 3 generations of people that were brought up not from, okay? But in the time of, let's say, Hanukkah, which is what we're talking about, what Jew would speak Greek? They're the enemy. They're the enemy. They're the people who brought Zeus into the temple. You mean I'm going to speak? That's like
the spies. Military people who need to strategize.
Okay, military people are not Talmidei Chachamim. Military people, not the average day. What was the language of the Jewish people in the time of Jesus? Aramaic.
Was the colloquial
and Hebrew was the other language. Yes, not Greek. No self-respecting Jew spoke Greek unless they wanted to be part of Roman society. So if you're going to write a Bible that you call the New Testament, you would have, if you were really Jewish, what language you would have written it in, either Hebrew or you would have written in Aramaic. There are no Aramaic versions of the New Testament, certainly not for 300 years afterwards. The original versions of the New Testament are in Greek. Why? Because these were not Jews, despite the church's claim that Matthew was a Jewish tax collector. Nonsense. Matthew didn't write Matthew. That's clear. Luke didn't write Luke because he says so. Okay. John didn't write John. And Mark didn't write Mark. It's all nonsense. That's correct. They're not written by those people. See, what they do, it's off topic, they claim that Matthew and Mark were witnesses or were in contact with witnesses, right? So Matthew himself was a witness of Jesus's ministry, and therefore it's a continuation of Jesus's ministry. That's what they claim. They claim that Mark was a student of one of the disciples, so therefore Mark received the tradition, okay? It's all nonsense and crap. It's completely wrong. These books were written anonymously. Nobody knows who wrote them. They were not written by eyewitnesses. There were no eyewitnesses. Paul himself was not an eyewitness. of the living Jesus, maybe of the resurrected one he was, and that assumes you believe he was resurrected. If you don't believe that, then Paul was just crazy. Okay, brilliant but crazy. But none of these books were written by eyewitnesses. Therefore, there's a break in the tradition. As a Jew, what do we know for sure? There's no break in the tradition. Pirkei Avot continues on, tells you up in here, and then you can continue on. There are rabbis who have a rabbinic lineage that they can trace all the way back to the Mishnah time. We have no break in the tradition at all. I mean, there are rabbis who don't have any lineage, and that's okay. But we know who the Rambam's teacher is, we know who his teacher was, and we know who his teacher was. So when the Rambam is writing, we know where it's coming from. And the Rambam is writing 2,500 years after the Torah is given. These people couldn't keep the lineage, couldn't keep their tradition straight for 50 years. The earliest books of the New Testament are written in the 50s. Paul, he wasn't a witness. The earliest gospel, Mark, was probably written in 70. He wasn't a witness.
50 AD?
Yes.
But that's still before the destruction of the temple. The second
Who has nothing to do with the destruction of the temple? Jesus died 33.
What's it? Oh, well,
So what?
at age 33?
What was his message? We have no idea. He didn't write any books. What does Moses do before he dies?
Katav Sefer.
How do we know?
Because it says.
Because it says so. I wrote down all these things. Signed Moses. So there's no, and then Joshua, and then we know. You just go through the Tanakh. You know exactly how it was passed on from generation to generation. So they don't, and there's a very simple reason why he didn't write anything. You know why they didn't write anything? Why wouldn't, maybe Jesus wasn't a writer. Why didn't he get a ghostwriter? Why didn't they write anything down for such a long time? Why the first stories of the life of Jesus 50 years after he died? Anybody have any idea?
Well, it's in the. He was a student of.
Don't give me stories. I'm out here from the Christian perspective. Don't tell me, they don't say he was of anybody. Why is it that nothing was written down until 70? And remember, when Mark was writing his gospel, he had the letters of Paul in front of him. So the theology was already established by Paul. They make an assumption or they make a claim that they are continuing on the theology of Jesus, but that's a claim. There's no proof of that. Okay? So why didn't...
Roman Empire needed a religion.
Oh, that's after. That's hundreds of years later. Why didn't Jesus or his disciples write anything down? Very unusual. Jewish people, when they get messages from God, they generally write them down if they're asked to by God, right? If they're a true prophet. Well, he wasn't a prophet, so forget about that, right? We know that he wasn't a prophet because there's no prophets after the destruction of the first temple, right? Whoever was a prophet before the destruction was a prophet afterwards, and that's it. All those prophets, when they died, that was the end of prophecy. But that being said, why didn't he write anything down? Why didn't his disciples write anything down? Very simple. He said, I'm not going to be gone too long. He said, I'll be back very soon. Before any of you taste death, I will be back. So what happened? They said, he's coming back. He's coming back. We don't have to write anything down. He's going to come back. And that second coming, because of the failure the first time, is going to be clear for everybody to see. So we don't have to write anything down. So what happens as time went on? People started to die. The people who witnessed what he had to say started to die or died. And then they said, uh-oh, we must have misunderstood what he said because he's not back. It's already 20, 30, 40 years later, and people have already tasted the taste of death. What does that mean? Uh-oh, we better write things down. And then, of course, they embellished as things went on and so on. It got bigger and bigger and bigger, you know. Anyway, I'm going to give a whole class on this nonsense because this is more important what we're learning here. Coming back. So we see here what? Zechira is what? Rosh Hashanah, right? Ken zichron teruah shu b'yom HaShabbat. Kvar efshar heyot pirush zechira lashon zachar. Therefore, the lashon of zechira is from lashon zachar. masculine. Mamash ki al yedei zichrut shehu hayesod hu yichud kol hasfirot. What do we say the yesod is? What is the yesod? Zichrut. What is zichrut? The male member. What am I missing?
I got two different shoes.
Okay, don't worry about it, Shah. We love you. It was early in the morning. You got ready. Okay? What does this mean, the zichrut? The zer anpin, how does it connect to the yesod? Through the, how does zer anpin, how does it connect to the malchut? Through the yesod. That's the zichrut. That's how the man connects to the woman. That's how the man, zachar, connects to the nekeva. Okay? Ubi'ur dvarav, now he's going to explain what the Pardes is saying, because this is what the Pardes Rimonim just said. Kamo etzel adam hagufu bechinat maaseh. By the man, the goof, the body is the bechina of aseh, which means to do. Your hands are to do, your legs are to do, your body is to function in the world, yes? Maaseh, ve'amahashava hu hashoresh shel maasim. But the source of all the actions of man is where? Mahashava. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. The sham nimtza hazikaron, and in the machshava is where we find the zikaron, the memory. Yes? Ukshadam zocher, when a person remembers, hu matchil lif'ol al pi zichrono, he begins to function based on what he remembers. Ken be'elyonim, it's similar in the upper worlds. B'ma'amakeh mahashava, in the depths of the mahshava. What mahshava?
Hashem's will.
Correct. Hashem's mahashava, right? The zikaron shoresh harachamim, and the zikaron is the root of rachamim. Zacharti lach chesed neurayich. I remember for you the chesed of your youth. Talking about the Jewish people and how they left Egypt with nothing to eat. They left with a lot of money because God told them to leave with money, but they left without provisions. Okay, you're going on a trip. You know you're going to Har Sinai. They know they're going someplace in the desert, right?
Mhm.
What is the most important thing you have to bring with you?
Well, water.
Water.
They had a well.
They didn't have a well. They just had water. And then 3 days goes by. As soon as they leave Egypt, what happens? There's no water. What does that show you? They left Egypt without water. If you were walking on Boca Raton yesterday, okay, it was 92 degrees and it was like humid as heck, okay? If you have to walk 30 minutes, okay, you have water with you. Because the first thing you recognize, I'm going outside, within 15 minutes, it's like I'm taking a shower, okay? I better have water on board or I'm going to start getting a headache, okay? Which means, and that's only for 30 minutes. Imagine if I'm telling you, you know what? I want you to, yesterday was 92 and very humid. I want you to walk all the way to the other side of Boca Raton. What are you gonna bring with you? You're gonna bring with you gold, silver, money? No, you're gonna bring with you a bottle of water. If you don't bring that, you got problems. They left Egypt without water, only water for 3 days. When they ran out of water, what happened? They said, "Where's the water?" What does that show you? They had such emunah in Hashem that they left without water. Who does that? Hashem's gonna provide.
Then why don't they just ask for?
Okay, that's why the first time they complained they didn't have water, it wasn't so bad.
Ma'am Riva is not bad as the rock situation later on.
No. Okay, let's think about I'll read. No.
Why would it be bad?
What's the problem with Mei Meriva?
Kimarim hem, they were.
Got to get the whole pasuk. Where's the whole pasuk? Vayilonu, right? What does it say? I'll read. Give me a Tanakh. Let's go inside. The Chumash is fine. The problem with Mei Meriva was what? That they complained about water? Was that the real problem? Vaikra Shem Hamakom Masa Umriva Al Riv Bnei Yisrael ve'al nasotam et Adonai lemor hayesh Adonai bekirbenu im ayin. What's the problem with Mei Merivah? The problem with Mei Merivah wasn't they complained because they didn't have water. They complained whether God was close to them or not. They complained, is God close to us or not? Is God with us or not? Is God involved with us anymore? Yes, he took us out of Egypt that we saw open. Is he still with us? What happens when a Jew asks that question? Is God with me or not? Which means not from my perspective, I sinned and that's why he's distant. No, that requires a little too much emet in reality. Okay? No, I'm asking, I'm good. I'm Chasidah Kadisha. Why is Hashem not with me?
It's a safek.
So what happens?
Amalek.
Vayavo Amalek Vayilahem im Yisrael b'refidim. Oh, you mean you think your behavior is good and I'm not with you and your behavior is good? It's one of two things. It's either I'm not with you because your behavior is bad, or Amalek is going to come show you what it means. And that's the key. So in Mei Merivah, the problem was what was when they complained about the water, right? What happened to them? This is after the man, don't forget. Let's go back. Okay. ויבוא אלימה ושם 12 עונות מים ו70 תימן ואנו שם על המים וייסעו מאלים ויבוא כל הדת בני המדבר סין אשר בין אלים בין סיני ב15 יום לחודש השני לצאתם מארץ מצרים וילונו כל הדת בני ישראל על משה ועל אהרון במדבר. They complained against Moses and Aaron. ויאמרו עליהם בני ישראל מי ייתן מותנו ביד אדוני בארץ מצרים ושבטנו. No, 1 second. No, sorry. Let's go back a little further. Oh, no. Let's go to the beginning. They just finished Shirat Hayam, high point. They just crossed over. Yes? Okay, what did it say? Vayasa Moshe et Yisrael mi Yam Suf. He had to drag them away from Yam Suf. Why do you have to drag them? Vayasa, which means he forcibly took them away from Yam Suf. What does that mean? Why do you have to do that? Why didn't they want to leave Yam Suf? Why didn't they want to leave? What were they doing? What were they? Halavai. What were they doing? Why didn't they want to leave Yam Suf?
Singing Shirat Hayam?
After they finished singing Shirat Hayam. Why didn't they want to leave Yam Suf?
They're still collecting those spoils.
The golden Suf is washing up. Oh my God, manna from heaven. Here we go.
From the Richvei Paro.
From the Richvei Paro, the gold is washing up. Okay, we need more gold. It's not that we took all them Egypt. What happened? There was more gold that the army had, and we're going to take that, which means we want to collect all the cash we can. Not realizing that the most important thing they need when they go in the Midbar is not cash. There's no newsstands. There's no place where you can buy water. You need water, not money. Okay, continuing on. Then it says, Vayetzu Midbar Shur. They went to Midbar Shur. Vayelechu shloshet yamim b'midbar v'lo matzu mayim. And they went 3 days in the desert and they didn't find water. Why not? Cheskel, why didn't they find water?
With Miriam.
Why didn't they find water? Your goal is to go to Har Sinai, receive the Torah. You're delaying leaving Yam Suf because why?
You have everything.
You're collecting money. Okay, so God says, all right, see how that works for you for the next 3 days. Right? See how that works for you. You want to collect money? Great. You don't have any water with you? Let's see how that works for you. What happens? Now 3 days go by, they have no water. And they realize, what? The money is not helpful. We need water. And then what happens? They come to a place with water. But the water is bitter. Why is the water bitter? Because they lost sight of the objective. What's the objective?
Receive the Torah.
To go receive the Torah. They lost sight of the objective. So the water was initially bitter, right? They couldn't drink it. Okay, that's why it's called Mara. And they complained again, and they said, what are we going to drink? What does Moshe Rabbeinu do? He cries out to God, prays, and God puts a tree, the tree is put into the water, and the water was sweetened. Okay?
Moshe takes the tree.
Sham, okay, we could look at it anyway. Sham sam lo chok mishpat v'sham nisau. And what happens here? Vayovom shamo tishma. There's no punishment here. They needed to realize that what their objective is to go get the Torah.
Amalek was a punishment.
Can we do one at a time? Their objective is to go get the Torah. The rechush that was talked about the Avraham Avinu was not just the money. The rechush, the true rechush that they're going to receive is the Torah and Har Sinai. The Torah is Nim Shel Alamayim, right? You're going to go to the water. It's called the Torah. Okay. In the meantime, this water you have now is bitter. How is it sweetened? Sham Samlo Hok Umishpat. What is Hok? What is Mishpat? Zakta Rashi. Rashi says Moshe Rabbeinu taught them there about Para Aduma. Moshe Rabbeinu taught them there about Shabbat. Moshe Rabbeinu taught them some Torah. And what happened? The water got sweet. What's the etz? What is the etz? Etz Hayim Hilim Hazikim Ba. Jews, wake up. If you grab hold of the Torah, the water is always going to be sweet. That's the message. That's the consequences. The consequences is they lost sight of the objective. They stayed by the ocean to collect the money. So Hashem wanted to remind them what the objective is. There's no punishment here. The punishment comes later. They complain they don't have anything to eat. They complain they don't have water. And then Amalek comes. So the beginning, which is by the Mara, which is the water, bitter waters, what's the Avon? It's that they lost sight of the objective. There's no punishment. It's called Masa'u Meriva at the end. But the beginning part, Mara, there's a little infraction. They lost sight of the objective, but there's no punishment. Then they complain again that they don't have water. And that's when they got problems. Okay?
Why did they complain again?
They wanted something to eat. Gold and silver, but there's no shuk, there's no marketplace in the desert. What are they going to eat?
Oh, this is before the man.
This is before the man. Okay.
When did the well of Miriam come into play?
When Moshe Rabbeinu over here hits the rock, that becomes the well of Miriam. Okay. So we see that what? Zacharti la chesed ne'urayich, right? Ve'ayesod moshech et hashefa ha'chaim ve'rachamim ha'elyonim. And the Yesod draws the shefa of life and mercy from above. Min ha'shoresh ha'elyon. What is the shoresh ha'elyon? The keter, the first three, yes? Umashpia otam latachtonim. It influences them on the lower. The chen zichron milshon askarata. The word zichron is from the language of askarata, right? Milshon kishur, from the language of connection, kishur. Shayesod kosher kol asfirot l'shosham, because the yesod ties all of the sfirot to their root, right? Ha'elyon kamo she'olech u'mevei rabbeinu, like our rabbi is going to explain further. What does zikaron do? What is the function of memory? It connects the past with the now. I'm here now, and the memory connects me to the past. Right? That's zikaron. So it's a connector. Good? Yeah. That's why the word in zikaron is zachar. There's a piece of zikaron, the shoresh of zikaron, lizkor, which is the same word as zachar, which is man. It's a connector. Hold on. The word zikaron in Hebrew, the word zecher in Hebrew is memory, okay, is the same letters as zachar, which is man. Zachar also means I remembered in the past. But the word zachar also means man. What is the connection between memory and man? Not man, men.
They're both types of connectors.
They're connectors. Zikaron connects the past with the present. What connects the present with the future? Not a trick question.
Okay.
What connects the present with the future? Prophecy.
People.
Prophecy.
But we don't have
We
any
don't have
prophecies.
prophecies.
That's why. So we do have prophecy, by the way. That's a
Now?
big mistake. We have a lot of prophecy that's connecting us with the future. What's that prophecy? Open up the Tanakh.
What was written in the past?
Right. It was written in the past, but it's talking about much of it is talking about the future. So the reason, we don't have prophets. We don't have prophets today, right
Is there
now.
A discussion, or I guess a conversation between who was the last prophet, or does everyone agree on?
We know the last prophet. Malachi was the last prophet.
Malachi wasn't Zach.
Malachi, as they say it in English. Malachi. Malachi was the last prophet because he's the last book in the last of the prophets in the Tanakh. Okay, so now coming back, so prophecy connects the present with the future.
Third temple.
Now, the prophets wrote 3,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, but they were writing had a message for all time, including the present and including the future. So when you look at prophecies, are they talking about all the prophecies have something to say about the future? Otherwise, it wouldn't be in the Tanakh. If it has no message for all time, it wouldn't be in the Tanakh. Let's take the prophecy we read yesterday. Read a prophecy yesterday, correct? Is that a prophecy talking about the future or about the present in the time of the Tanakh?
Future.
How do you know?
What do you mean?
Because it's
what's coming.
what the book of the prophets. That's Haftarot.
That's why this book is indispensable. You learn things in this book, you say to yourself, oh my gosh, things I'm just missing every single day until I learn the secrets. Let's look here. Haftarah is on page 1176. 1176. Okay.
What was the Haftarah?
One second. It was והכהנים הלווים בני צדוק אשר שמרו את משמרת מקדשי בתאות בני ישראל מעלי המה יקרבו אליי לשרתני ועמדו לפניי להקריב לי חלב אדם נאום אדוני אלוהים. Seems to me that's a prophecy talking about. I'll read it in English. But the Levite Kohanim, descendants of Tzadok, who safeguarded the charge of my sanctuary when the children of Israel strayed from me, let them draw near to me to serve me. Let them stand before me to offer me fat and blood, the words of my Lord Hashem Elohim.
We don't have a base of Mikdash to do that.
Okay, but this prophecy was written before the building of the second Bet HaMikdash, correct?
I don't know when it was.
How do you know it's not talking about the second Bet HaMikdash? As a matter of fact, descendants of Tzadok HaKohen were some of the first Kohanim there in the second Bet HaMikdash. They shall come to my sanctuary, and they shall approach my table to serve me, and they shall safeguard my charge. How do you know that's not talking about the second Bet HaMikdash?
There's no shulchan.
Now, when they came to the gates of the inner courtyard, they are to wear linen clothes. Let no will be upon them. They serve in the gates of the inner courtyard and within. Linen turbans. How do you know this prophecy? I mean, we know the prophets are all talking about the future. Where is the clear indication this is a prophecy for the future?
You mean the third temple?
What is the name of God used here? We're in a book about the names of God. Yes? What is the name of God used here? Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud. Yud, Ke, Vav, Ke, read as Elohim. Look inside. And look at the names of God in that prophecy. And you see almost all of them are what? Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud, Adonai, and then Yud Ke Vav Ke as Elohim. See that? Pass it along so everybody else can see. Show and tell today.
Where is it? Show me.
The bottom. The one below. No, look in the English. Look in the Hebrew. Got to look in the Hebrew. Look in the Hebrew. What do you see? Look at the end of the first pasuk.
It's written Hashem Hashem, but Hashem.
Not Hashem Hashem. That's not what's written there.
Oh, here.
Okay,
Adokay, you kebabkay.
Aleph
Oh,
Daled
yeah,
Nun
yeah,
Yud,
sorry.
and then Yud Ke Vav Ke. But how is Yud Ke Vav Ke pronounced there? It's not pronounced. We don't say Adonai Adonai. It's Adonai Elohim.
Yes.
Now we didn't get there yet. What sfirah does that correspond to?
Yesod.
No, we learned Yesod is El Chai. That's not
No,
Yesod.
no. This is Binah.
Binah. It corresponds to the Binah. Okay? And anytime you see that formulation, Aleph Daled Nun Yud and Yud Ke Vav Ke with Elokim, that means the future. When the future? Mashiach Tchiat HaMetim.
Wow. Heavy duty.
Now let's come back to the Tanakh. Let's come back to the Torah. We've talked about this before, but that's okay. We'll do L'Chazarah. It's beautiful. Where is the first time we see that name in the Torah? It's in the Torah, I think 4 times, 4 or 5 times maybe. Where is the first time we see that name? I love doing Chazarah. It's important because then we remember things better. We repeat things, we remember. So forgive me if you remember what I said before, but if you don't, then let's do it again. Brit Ben Abetarim. Very good. Where do we see over there? I'm in Lech Lecha. Okay. And what does it say over here?
He's in a Tardema type of state.
Before we get to Tardema, what does it say? Vayomar Adonai Elohim bama eda ki irashena. God just told them that you're going to inherit the land. What does he say?
What proof do I have that I'm going to know? How are the Jews not going to sin in the future? What proof am I going to have that this is actually going to come true?
Is that what it is?
Amen.
God just told you, man of faith, Abraham, who lived his life with faith and faith alone. God just told him that his children are going to inherit the land. And he's doubting it?
He's doubting the generations aren't going to sin.
God just said they're going to get the land. Therefore, if they're going to get the land, why does sin make a difference? They're going to get the land. If God is saying, is it a good prophecy or bad prophecy? It's a good prophecy, right? Good prophecy has to come true no matter what. Bad prophecy doesn't have to come true. If the people change their behavior, then... Okay, but it has the outer aspect, looks like it's a bad prophecy. I'm going to destroy Nineveh. That's a bad prophecy. Okay? You can change your behavior, and now the decree is torn up.
Yeah, but it's conditional when he says, I'm going to destroy it if.
That's not what was written to Yonah. Yonah didn't go there and say, I'm going to destroy the... God said he's going to destroy the city, and if you don't behave. Now, that's not what he said. He said, statement, in 40 days, this city will be overturned. God said, I'm here from God. This is the message. In 40 days, it's done. There's no ifs, ands, what? It doesn't say that.
They figured out now.
Oh, God, my computer's going to start dying now. Low battery. Do me a favor, in the bag, there's a white cord. Front, all the way in the front. There we go. No, I'm sorry. All the front pack.
So much class with 3 hours.
2 hours, not 3 hours yet.
Is that right?
Don't shorten it up. There you go. And then in the back, all the way in the back one, thank you. All the way in the back one, there's a charger. Don't worry about it. There's a charger in here in the back. Look on the other side. No. Go up. No, down. Bring it here. No, thank you so much. Sorry about that.
I see an adapter back.
No, right next to it. Right next to where you were just. There you go.
You want the battery
Thank you so much.
Just say battery pack. I'm looking for cable.
I don't know how much is in there, but we'll do the best we can. Let's see how that works.
USB-C. Okay.
Let's see how that works. Okay.
Macintosh is good.
Let's see how long that lasts. Okay. So, what is Abraham asking? Bama edak. First of all, this is not the first time Adonai Elohim appears. If we look a couple of Pesukim before, what does it say? in verse number 2. Vayomer Avram Adonai Elohim ma titen li ve'anochi holech ariri uben meshek beti hu damesek Eliezer. So Abraham is over here he's saying, my children are going to inherit the land. I have no children. So does that mean that Eliezer is going to be inheriting the land? Because he's the only, I have no children. Now, why am I saying that this is the first time as opposed to here? The Gemara asks a question. It basically says the first person to call God in 2,000 years the name Adon was Avraham Avinu. Where? And it brings the second pasuk, not the first pasuk. It brings the later pasuk to say this is the first time in history that a person called God by the name Aleph Daled Nun Yud. Well, why didn't it bring the first pasuk, which is earlier? Because this happened before. The Brit Ben Abetarim happened when Avraham Avinu was 70 years old, and this other part here happened when he was 75. From here we learn that Parashat Lech Lecha is not in order. That's what the Gemara learns out. And even the Ramban, who generally doesn't like to go out of order, has to concede that here the parasha is out of order. So the first time Avraham Avinu says the name Adon is by the Brit Ben Abetarim, which happened when he was 70 years old, which means before he came to the land of Israel at 75. Means before Lech Lecha, yes? Good? Lech Lecha is 75. Brit Ben Abetarim happened when he was 70.
But what? Where?
How do we know? How do we know Brit Ben Abetarim happened when he was 70?
Because the Gemara says it's the first time.
No.
Oh, wait.
Because how many years were they in Egypt? 400, it says. And then, Rega. And then it says 430. In the Brit Ben Abetarim, Avraham is told, your children will be slaves in a land that is not theirs for 400 years. When the Jewish people left Egypt, it says, how long were they there? 430 years. Which is it? 400, 430. And then really they were there for 210.
It's from the birth of Isaac.
Ah, that's Rashi. Rashi says we start counting from the birth of Isaac. The birth of Isaac.
Which is Zerah and Eretz Elechem?
Zerah, the Zerah of Avraham will inherit the land, which means the Zerah of Avraham will experience 400 years of slavery in a land that is not theirs, which means they're going to be a stranger in a land that's not theirs. Yitzchak did not own anything in the land of Israel, so therefore he's a stranger in the land of Israel. That's why Rashi starts counting from the birth of Yitzchak. And from the birth of Yitzchak to Yetziat Mitzrayim is 400 years. Why is the Torah saying 430? Because it's including from the time Avraham Avinu was told that his son was going to be in a land that is not his. That's how we know. And how old was Avraham when Yitzchak was born? 100. Minus 30, 70. That's how we know that Brit Ben Abetarim Avraham was 70 years old, which is before Lech Lecha, because in Lech Lecha it says, and he's 75 years old. Why do I bring this up? The Gemara is only focusing on the Aleph Daled Nun Yud. The Gemara is not focusing on the Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's after. What is this prophecy talking about? What is Brit Ben Abetarim? It's talking about the future of the Jewish people. It's talking about how there's going to be exiles, right? There's going to be 4 exiles corresponding to the animal parts. Okay. There's going to be exiles, okay? And then afterwards, they're going to come back. Rechush Kadol, there was a part of that prophecy was where? With the Torah. But the real fulfillment of this prophecy is when? With the Mashiach. How do we know? And what is Avraham Avinu asking? He's asking, Bama Edah, in what zechut, what merit are my children? Not because they're going to sin. Of course they're going to sin. In what merit are they going to inherit the land? Why is that important? Because the land of Israel is only acquired through suffering. Torah is only required through suffering.
Why?
Because in life, things that are valuable require effort.
So why suffering effort?
Because suffering is effort. What does this mean? Why are the Jewish people in the exile for such a long time?
Could suffering feel good?
What is the what is the goal of the suffering?
Have to feel bad.
What is the goal of the suffering? Tamim tiyeh im Adonai Elohecha.
So the clean up.
What does tamim mean? Perfect. You shall be perfect. And when you are perfect, you're with God. How can a Jew be perfect? We are not God. Only God is perfect. A human being cannot be perfect.
We need to suffer.
How can we be perfect? This is my class on Wednesday. How can we perfect? In our emunah. Ani ma'amin be'emunah shalema. What is shalema? Complete, perfect. How do I know my emunah is shalem? Only when I'm tested. So we have suffering. So what's going to happen when there's suffering to the Jewish nation? Some people are going to fall off the wagon. Why? Because they don't have proper emunah. Their emunah is not shalem. The ones who maintain their emunah no matter what survive the exile. Their children survive the exile and then receive the reward of Avraham from the Brit B'nai Betarim, which is what? Mashiach and Greater Israel. How do you know this prophecy is talking about the future, the Mashiach? The name, Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud, Yud Ke Vav Ke, read as Elokim. That's how this book helps a person to understand what's going on in the Torah and the Tanakh.
Wow. So that's why Abraham was tested 10 times.
And that proves he's a man of faith.
That's what I meant. No emunah.
And
no
that's why
test,
it
no
says
emunah.
in the Tehillim, lucky, happy is the man that is tested or that has suffering, that has difficulties. Why? Because that's how you show yourself foremost, because God knows what's inside. If God didn't know what was inside, he wouldn't be testing you. Okay? He only tests those who can withstand the test. Now, there's a natural thing based on the punishments that we deserve because we behaved, and people fall off the wagon because of that. But those who are doing proper behavior, they're still tested. And the goal is to show themselves that they have the emunah. What do you do when you're challenged? That's the question. What are we going to learn all of Bemidbar? Bemidbar is basically a microcosm, a micro experience of the entire Jewish nation throughout all of history. What's the mistake they make in Bemidbar? God is testing them, and they're failing the test. They're questioning. No. Emunah means no questions. No questions. That's called perfect faith. And that we can't have perfection. And any situation where there's an imperfection in the faith, what happens? Vayavo Amalek. Doubt. Safek. There can be no doubt. That is the level of emunah. And I'm going to assure you, it is almost impossible to have that level of emunah without studying this. It's very difficult. Unless a person understands, look like class I gave on Wednesday, unfortunately, there's sometimes people who are very, very intelligent and smart in halakha, but because they've never studied Kabbalah, they don't understand that some of their belief system in their head is problematic. And it can be something subtle. Like, for instance, does God change? Well, of course God doesn't change. So when it says that he gets angry, he changes, really? He becomes angry and then smile and happy? No, God doesn't change. Not only that, but his ratzon doesn't change. Nothing about God changes. We change. And when we change, we can access more shefa that is always there. That's why the analogy I gave was the man. A person went out to collect man. The man fell no matter what. Yes? How much you deserve is what falls, right? What's the difference between one Jew and another? How far they have to go get it.
Or it's consistency.
What's that?
It's consistency. Some
What?
had to bake it. Some could eat it raw.
No, I
Some
think
bake it
what
in the cake.
they could do anything they want with it. It was optional to do whatever you want. That wasn't a punishment. If it you can do with it what you want. The way a person knew their
How far they had to
level
go and get
was
it.
how far they had to go get it. Now, what happens if a person decides, I'm not going to go pick my man today? What happens?
They starve.
They starve.
They can just drink water, I guess.
So in order to go get the shefa, they had to go get it. Okay? And the more they distanced themselves from God, the more distance and effort they had to exert to go get their man. So a tzaddik had the man fall in front of his house. Just go outside, take the man, bring it in the house. There's no effort. People who are not so tzaddikim had to go far.
The ones that lack emunah have to go very far.
So the emunah is the key, because what was the emunah? The test was, I just finished all my man, because it was exact amount for each person for one day. What's tomorrow? I don't know. Is man going to fall tomorrow or not? So the Jews who recognize that the man is going to fall just like the shemesh rises, uba hashemesh v'names. The ones who recognize that just like the sun is going to rise the next day, the man is going to fall the next day, they went to sleep just fine. They had no insomnia. Those who had to have a bank account and an insurance policy and all that kind of stuff, they went to sleep. They don't know what's tomorrow going to bring. Their man was far away. So it was a way of honing in the emunah. Also behavior. A person doesn't have emunah, doesn't have good behavior. Hopefully a person that's good emunah, recognizes God is always there watching, has good behavior.
If you're collecting your man and you just get enough for yourself and your family, how are you collecting extra?
You're not collecting extra.
Then how do people collect extra and it stank?
It's spoiled. They collected extra and it's spoiled.
So how
They
do they
had to
collect it?
take
That's
exactly what they needed. The key factor was for a person to take what was needed.
So you had extra. You had the option to take extra, because that's
Yeah, of course there's an option to take extra. Those who took extra, the chazerim, they found out their man spoiled.
Okay. And then they probably had to go further and further.
But why is the man is the test of the emunah? Why? Because they had no bank account, they had no insurance policy,
and no refrigeration.
And
The metaphor, they're right there.
and why is it that Rabbi Rimanov, the one that had a yard site this past Shabbat, yes, the one that Ruby did something for that. Why is it, what Rabbi Rimanov is the one who we have something called on Parashat Haman. We read it on that Tuesday. He's the one who started that. Why is that? Because that represents the emunah. And when the emunah is there, the panasah, what you need is there. And if your emunah is good, what you don't get, you're not entitled to. Very simple. You get what you need. Masbiya l'chol hai ratzon. Whose ratzon? His ratzon, not yours. And of course, if a person's a tzaddik, what does he do? His ratzon is the ratzon of Hashem. So whatever Hashem gives him is what he says, thank you. And I don't need more.
Well, that part I don't deal with that.
And that's something we all have to work on, okay? Because we're not the Dora Midbar, which live with Hashem to that level of closeness. We don't live with that level of closeness. Our man every single morning is far away. We don't have it at our doorstep. Even if you work remotely, you don't have it at your doorstep. Continuing. Okay. I want to make sure I didn't skip anything. Ve'esod moshech et hashefa hachayim v'rachamim elyonim min hashorosh elyon, draws it from the shorosh elyon, umashpia otam latachtonim, and influences of the tachtonim. V'chen zichron milashon askarata, also zichron is from the language of askarata, milashon kishur, from the language of connection, right? Sheyesod kosher kol asfirot l'shorsham ha'elyon, because the yesod ties all the sfirot to the shorosh elyon. I think askarata is related to the ketoret. Let me look that up quickly. I should have prepared it ahead of time. I apologize. Askarata. Can't be too many of those words in the Torah. Askarata. was right. I was right. Here's the pasuk. Ve'vi'ah el bnei Aaron hakohanim ve'kamatz misham milo kumtso misolta mishamna al kol levonata viktir hakohen et azkarata hamizbecha isher. It's not about the mincha. It's not about the Torah. It's about the mincha.
But why is it saying maktir for
Mincha?
Yeah.
Great question.
Why not? Well, what should it use?
Great question. Great question.
Laktir
Great
really
question.
just means to burn.
So it's not burned. You don't burn the bread.
Well, how do
You cook it. You bake it. You
light it?
you bake it. You fry it. Right?
Chesed.
Why is it called lahaktir? So that question was asked to me yesterday. Baruch Hashem, if you look at the Torah to gives the answer. It said last week's parasha, the word Shabbat twice.
B'yom Shabbat, B'yom Shabbat.
B'yom HaShabbat, B'yom HaShabbat.
We went over that.
We did go over that. What does that mean? The bread, the lechem mapanim, is brought to the shulchan. It stays for the week.
It says fresh and steamy and hot.
And then the new Kohen group puts the new bread on there. The old bread is given off to the Kohanim that left. Right?
For the old mishmer. The mishmer comes
So both of them are haktara. What is the haktara of the lechem hapanim? It's not put on the mizbeach. It's eaten by the Kohen. And when the Kohen eats the sacrifice, when the Kohen eats the bread, that gives kapara to the Baal who brought it. So the eating of the mincha, the eating of the vegetable sacrifices by the Kohen, like the example here, is the haktara.
Like the haktara is mechaperet.
Correct.
This eating of the mincha is mechaper.
Correct. Okay? Okay. We have time for one more or not? What do you say? One more. The sun says one more. Let's go for one more. Nizkarim kol b'nei ha'olam. He sent one your way, boy. That was dad. Nizkarim kol b'nei ha'olam. All the people of the world are remembered, right? Rosh Hashanah. What is Rosh Hashanah? Kol ba'ei ha'olam. Everybody is remembered. Yes, that's what it says. Hazikaron more al panea. The zikaron is teaching us on the face of it, on the face value, the hashgacha in mercy of God on us. Like the Ramban wrote in Breshit, chapter 8, verse number 1. Avala zichira shemar bechaya ubabema ena bizchut. Zichira regarding a chaya and behema is not with merit. I'll see what he's talking about here. The only one that has zechut or merit or obligation is man. Animals have no merit. Animals have no deficit. Why is it that the shore, when a man has relations with an animal, the man is stoned, and the shore and the animal is also stoned? Why are you stoning the animal? What did the animal do? Based on what we just said, animals shouldn't be stoned. It's for the man. So nobody says, this is the shore that this man died because he had sex with, relations with. So the shore is killed not because of the shore. The shore is killed because of the man.
That's not fair.
Animals are here to serve man. They're not. They have
Even
no.
Even to die.
They have no merit. They have no demerit. And by the way, the shore and his kal cannot be eaten. It's just lost. Okay, there's no eating, because otherwise the person who sins benefits, right? So there's no way. There's no benefit. That animal has to be stoned, and no one can eat from it. Continuing on, so animals don't have this. They don't.
When you say they have no merit, I believe King David was able to talk with animals.
You could talk to them. That's great, but they have no merit.
After he wrote the Tehillim, he was feeling pretty boastful about himself, and I'm pretty sure a toad or a frog said, "Oh, that that you do that, I write 4,000 new ones every day. So
Okay, but they have no merit on their own. Everything the animal exists for is for man. So what we do is it says, Shlomo HaMelech in Mishlei says, go to the ant and you will learn not to be lazy, which means their natural behavior is there to teach us certain things that we're lacking in our behavior. So they instinctively are not lazy. Ants are instinctively not lazy, right? They do work, because if they don't work, they don't eat, right? But they're not, there's no zechut. That's how they are created. There's no other option for them, right? But they're there for us to see. We can learn from the ant how not to be lazy. Shlomo HaMelech has a number of animals that we learn from. Look, the chatul, go to the chatul, so you learn sniut, you learn modesty. Cats will not defecate if someone is around. They're always going to do it in private. They want to go, a dog will dump them out where it is. A cat is going to go into a place quiet. If you think about a litter box for a cat, what do you have? It's covered. Why? Because they're modest. There's a modesty of the chatul that is not for a dog. Dog is outside in front of everybody, dumps in front of the fire hydrant, and then someone's got to clean up after him, right? That's not the cat. So there's different animals. They're there to teach us. They're there to teach us through their behavior, through their instinctual behavior, how to function. A person should wake up in the morning like a namer. Why namer? Namer is always able to wake up right away to go eat. Yes?
that's what they're, for us, that's what they're there for. But my question is, do they not have, put that right, but they don't communicate with Hashem? They don't have, they're not meritorious in the sense.
I don't see animals communicating with Hashem.
They don't have.
What? They don't make any sense?
There's all kinds of
And they can be used by a malach in order to communicate with man. Bilam. Aton. Right? His donkey. Right? But they're not, again, this is what the Ramban is saying. The Ramban is they have no zchut or chovah. They're like angels in some way. Angels have no merits and they have no demerits. They're even. They have no yetzer hara. Animals have no yetzer hara. They also have no yetzer tov. They just have yetzer. It's instinct. Okay? The Adam levado, the Ramban says, chovah and zchut is only with Adam. By the way, here he's talking about not just Jews, Gentiles as well. Avala zichira bahem ki zachar tevar kodsho shamar ve'aya olam. But they have zichira. Animals have memory. They remember things, right? A dog learns to remember. There's a certain that you can train animals because there's a certain rudimentary memory that they have. Generally, behavior is guided by things that are unpleasant or pleasant. That's how animals function, right? Animals function. They'll do something when they receive a reward, and they'll stop doing something when they receive a punishment. The goal of a human being is not to be like that. The goal of a human being is to do what Hashem wants, not because I'm afraid I'm going to get punishment or I'm going to get reward if I do what Hashem wants. The goal of a human being is not to be like an animal, but to say, you know what, I'm going to do this for God. That is not within the power of animals. They don't do it for God. They have no concept that when the dog comes to your house when you come home and is licking your feet, it's because you're going to give him something to eat. He's not worshiping God that way. Okay? Correct. Veratzona shelo bevriat haolam ala lefanav ratza bikum haolam biminim asher barabo. So God wanted the world to have a certain level of existence in a certain way, and the animals were created to facilitate that existence in the world. Okay? And part of that is to serve man, both in learning from their good behavior, learning from their instinctual behavior. And if an animal can do it, why can't I? I'm a higher creature, right? And also to basic for them to fulfill their purpose, which is to be a good steak, so I can make a bracha and do shechita. I know it's not popular. It's not a popular idea. I do get it, but and they shouldn't be suffering. We don't have to make them suffer. But at the end of the day, animals are to serve man. That's the Torah's perspective. Can't make them suffer. They have to be slaughtered properly. Right? Can't rip a living limb off an animal, even if a person's a Gentile. That's not how you can eat.
They have to be fed properly?
They have to be fed properly until you slaughter them to eat them. V'chen katav Ramban. Okay, and that's why dogs belong outside, not inside. V'aratzon shelo briat haolam ala lefanav ratz. Okay, wait. V'chen katav Ramban v'yizkor Elohim et Noach. God remembered Noach. Shipa'ala ata midat harachamim, that now was going to become the midah of mercy. V'hitorer haratzon ha'elyon l'kiyum ha'olam. What was the mercy? When he remembered Noach, that means he's in the teva. In the teva, there is no kiyum of the olam. Why not? Because Noach in the teva was forbidden to have relations with his wife, and all the men inside the teva were forbidden to have relations with his wife, which means the world was in suspension.
Why were they forbidden?
Because they had responsibility for what happened on the outside. They can't do that. It was like the world was in suspended animation. The kiyum of the olam was held in the balance until all of the creatures that were alive were destroyed. Right? And then Vayiskor Elohim et Noach. What? Which is one of the Pesukim we bring up in the Tefillah Rosh Hashanah. It's one of the Zichronot. There are 3 Pesukim from the Torah, 3 Pesukim from the Tanakh, 3 Pesukim from the Navi, from the Ketuvim, and then 1 Pasuk again from the Torah. Yes, that's how the Zichronot. That's how all the Tefillah Shof. That's Musaf Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so continuing on, Vayiskor Elohim et Noach. This is in the Rosh Hashanah Tefillah. That pasuk is brought, which means Shepa'ala ata midat harachamim. Now is going to become the midat harachamim. That Hashem now is willing to have the world restart. Restarting the world means the teva has to rest. They have to get out of the teva, right? And then they have to procreate. That's restarting the world. And regarding humans, man, the zikaron is first, and then the action is after. First there is remember, and then there is action. Aval etzel Hashem yitbarach zechira eno zechirat ovdut. But regarding God, we can't say that he remembered now but didn't remember another time. Why? Because when we're talking about God, there is no change. So what does it mean, Vayiskor Elohim et Noach? To us it appears that God remembered Noach, but God never forgot Noach. Which means now is the time for the Shefa to be opened up for Noach to receive. And that's why it comes out of the Teva. It's not that there was a change. There's no change in God. The change is in man. The ability to access the Shefa. Maybe this will be something that my friend will be able to understand when we talk about this again another Wednesday. So we understand that there's no change. The Gezerah, okay, the will of Hashem does not change. It's just the ability to access the full potential of what is out there is limited by the person themselves. That's what the Ramban is saying here. Because God is achdut pashut, simple unity. There are no parts. There are no pieces. There are nothing subjected to time. Everything is unlimited, and everything is, even though there are all these things, it's all part of oneness. Is that understandable for us? No.
Why is it called Pashut?
Pashut is not simple. Pashut is spread out, which means litpashet. Okay? Or you can also look at it as simple. Simple unity. There is nothing simpler than unity. What? Not number one, because number one is still
a number.
A number.
Which is an adjective you can't have.
So it's not number one, it's unity. A perfect unity. That's what we're talking about. That's what echad means, a perfect unity. Radical monotheism, as Tovia Singer calls it. Christianity is not radical monotheism. Judaism is radical monotheism. There are no parts, there are no pieces, there's nothing like that. There's no change, there's no time. That zechira etzel Hashem yitbarach hu ha'pafalat achat mimidotav. What is the zechira? Imagine there is a shefa, but the shefa is blocked by the action of man. When the action of man changes, what happens? The shefa becomes unblocked. Nothing about the shefa changed. The ability to access the shefa is what changes. Or in the words of the Ramban here, the action through the midot, which means the expression of the shefa, that changes. But the shefa is unchanged. So it's either the shefa is coming through the din, and then the person's going to feel judgment, or the shefa is coming through chesed, and the person is going to feel loving kindness. But the shefa is the same. That's the concept of the kav. The kav is yud ke vav ke. Ani yud ke vav ke lo shaniti. There's no change. The lenses of the sfirot allow there to be transmission of that shefa to be received by man in different ways. But the shefa is unchanged. Got it? And the key factors also is, in order for there to be transmission of shefa, there has to be connection. Why is karet so serious? Because when a person has karet chas v'shalom, the shefa is not reaching them. Why? Because they're cut off. That's the worst. We want to be connected. We want to be connected chazak, strong. And when we're connected strong, we have access to the shefa. Okay, we'll stop here.
Okay.
All right. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.